What's up, everyone? Welcome to the show. Does the show really have a name yet? No, I should think of one. I should have a formal name for the show. That would be classy. That would be professional. But then if it was professional, would it be me? I don't know. Very excited to be back. Took some time off, did a family trip, went to a wedding. I got a hat at the wedding. Maybe I'll wear it in the last hour of the show. I got like a cowboy hat. It was like a kind of Western themed wedding, and they gave free hats away at the rehearsal dinner, which that's cool. Also, shout out to the wedding band the first night. A bunch of some gals from Montana called Honey Holler. They're so good. So Plant Guy brings up something important. I'm doing an annoying thing with the stream being on both channels right now. I'm going to switch it fully to the Sideburns channel in July. What I'm going to start doing, hopefully next week if I can figure it out, is shit'll start on the main channel, but then it's going to automatically pivot to the other one. It's just annoying, and I don't want anyone to miss out. So I'm just trying to, I'm erring on the side of kind of sloppy and clunky, but lots to talk about today. Lots happened when I was gone. I really didn't do the phone for a few days. I did no phone. If you ever sees this, shout out to Tyler at the Pine Creek Lodge in Montana. I met a member of our community when I was at this amazing place called the Pine Creek Lodge in Montana. It's like a music venue, bar, outdoor space. Went there for a Father's Day brunch. I had a hell of a time, guys. I had an absolute hell of a time. One of the coolest places I've ever been. And it made it feel so much cooler that a gentleman who I'm pretty sure worked there or lived near there was a fan of the channel and stuff. So there you go. Let me see. Hey, what's up, Sayasa? I would say I do need some recommendations for what to call the stream, because I think one of you helped me come up with Sideburns as the name for the other channel. So I can use some help there. But a lot to talk about today. Some of it's just me catching up on news. But one of the things I do want to talk about is Christian violence. Yay, fun thing we all like to talk about. But unless you are not aware, you are probably aware, a deranged white Christian nationalist in Minnesota, one of my top 3 favorite states, murdered some people, some politicians over the weekend. Not good. Really not good stuff. So, let's see. Yeah, the stream is also on the main channel. It's annoying. I'll put the stream up on the screen so that everyone can see everything in that way, at least. It's clunky. It's clunky for now, but it's all going to come together. But I want to talk about the murder guy because it's something that I think is important, and I think there's some things we can get into there. I'm going to be joined later by Anthony Paul Smith. He is a professor of religion and philosophy at LaSalle University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's written a bunch of books on French philosophy and ecology and religion, all types of stuff. He's a genuinely distinguished scholar, and he's also a DJ, a techno DJ. So for religion heads, for techno heads, for all this sort of stuff. BU said, I love doing collaborations, BU. Heartburns, OnlyFans. There you go. We can do that soon. Watch the world burns. Does make sense. 3rd degree burns is good. I made a really annoying joke when I got my PhD. That I was now with 3rd degree burns. Nobody liked it except for me. Nobody liked that joke except for me. Feeling slightly under the weather. Let me know if any of you who have ever had this thing where you travel and then you get back to real life and you got to get, burns notice. That's pretty good. Oh, burns notice is really good. I gotta write that down. Okay. And also it's going to sound like World War III has happened outside. Is happening right now because they tore up the entire street outside my apartment yesterday, and now they're rebuilding the road. So it's very loud. Also, fun fact, Film director Jon Favreau was outside my house yesterday scouting for, so they're maybe shooting a movie or doing something in my neighborhood. I did not speak to him. I didn't say, hey, I loved you in the movie Chef, but there you go. Anthony Ball Smith in the chat. He will be joining us. He'll be joining us on the show in a little bit. Very excited to talk to him about that. I'm trying to think of any other housekeeping notes. One thing, my next video is almost done. It's being edited right now by the wonderful Greg. I finally made the video. That's the sort of like, here's how I got laid off from Wisecrack and what happened with the company and what I learned from it. And then a little bit of, not a full manifesto, but some bullet points, some priorities for this channel and stuff I'm doing, and a few announcements. So I'm excited for that video. It should hopefully be hitting Patreon, I don't know, maybe Friday, and then hitting the YouTube a little bit after that. So, just a reminder, if you want to sign up over on Patreon, you get all the videos early. I put a link in the chat right there. There's also a link in the description. And a reminder, if you sign up for free on Patreon, you're always going to know when videos and streams and stuff like that are coming out. So you at least get that sort of notice, and I appreciate having a little community. Ooh, burns before reading. Shit. Sorry, I got to keep up with these. Burns. And now when I could do like a thumb that had sort of like a Coen Brothers theme, that's really good. I mean, I don't have to keep Burns in the title, but I think that, when God gives you a last name like this, you might as well use it. So, okay, let's jump into some stuff. Let me figure out what we want to start with today. Let's start with this. Let's read one of our favorite sources on this show. That's slightly a joke that I'm making, but one of our favorite sources, as everyone knows, is, let's find this, is Christianity Today, one of our favorite websites. Let me just find this. Okay. So let's do a little rundown in case you've not heard about what happened yet. A guy who was a preacher man, but not in the cool way, did murder in Minnesota over the weekend. He murdered a Minnesota legislator, said God would raise up apostles and prophets to correct the church. So let's read about this. And then there's a couple of things I want to look at to get more into the background here. So we're going to talk about what happened, see if we can glean any meaning from it. And later, Anthony Paul Smith's going to talk to us. Also, Michael Luxembourg coming on the show later to talk about some lighter stuff. Actually, you know what, guys? I forgot that I had a kind of fun thing we were going to do first that isn't this. So let's do the fun thing first. And I know what you're thinking right now, like a fun thing on this show, but let's do the fun thing first. Okay. I want to look at something that our buddy Charlie Kirk did recently, guys. Now, Turning Point USA had a conference. I'm sorry for the hard pivot here, guys, but I promise you it'll be worth it. Turning Point USA, they did a conference. And if you don't know what Turning Point USA is, it's Charlie Kirk's organization where they go to colleges to tell you why you shouldn't go to college. And then they go to college to debate college students about why they're in college. And Charlie Kirk basically gets to go to college campuses and feel cool because I guess he didn't go to college. And it's fine to not go to college, but he seems very resentful about not having gone to college. And he's so resentful about not having gone to college. And now his whole life is about how you shouldn't go to college. But in this clip, he actually talks about why you should maybe go to college. So it's pretty interesting. So let's look at what Charlie Kirk says to a 14-year-old in braces that asks him a question.
Hi, Charlie. I'm Addie, and I'm 14. I'm a freshman in high school, and
Where are you at in life, Addie? I don't want to yell at a 14-year-old, but you're like a 14-year-old, and you want to go to the Turning Point USA conference to ask Charlie Kirk a question? No fucking way. When I was 14, the only conference I would have gone to ask a question would be if I went to the Jackass convention to ask Chris Pontius where he got his thongs for the Party Boy sketch, and if I could get one because I wanted to do a bit at the 8th grade dance. This is just nuts to me that things have been politicized so much that 14-year-olds are like, let's go to Turning Point USA. That's what I want to do. And I'm you know what 14-year-old girls wanted to talk to when I was 14? Jonathan Taylor Thomas, the star of Home Improvement. I'm pretty sure he was the middle son. Devin Sawa. Freddie Prinze Jr. These are people that 14-year-old young women when I was in school would have wanted to talk to, Lance Bass, things of that nature. Charlie Kirk, what are we doing?
I was wondering, as someone who has like a different opinion on college, what would you say the pros and cons are?
A line of young women
interested
to Dr.
in
Charlie Kirk.
political journalism, and what would your advice be?
So in case you didn't hear it, she was basically saying, I want to go to college, but you say college is bad. What would you tell me about college?
Yes, so let me also speak to some of the young ladies here in high school where your top, if you are, who's here where your top priority is get married and have kids? Raise your hand. Okay.
They all just go up. Listen, guys, getting married and having kids can be cool. I'm married. It's pretty cool. I have a kid. That rips. There's other stuff you can do, though.
Interestingly, I think there is an argument to bring back the MRS degree.
If you don't know what the MRS degree is, it's a thing that people used to say back in the day where a woman would say, I'm going to college to get my MRS degree, my like marriage degree, like an MRS degree. Did someone say mob mentality for a potential thing? That's also really good. God, that's also really good. You guys are great. Oh, please like the stream if you have not already. And sorry if I reminded anyone that they are old. But yeah, so the MRS degree, an MRS degree is just the idea that you go to college specifically for the role of getting married. You pay tuition, you go to classes, you participate in campus life, and your sole purpose is acquiring a suitor to betroth you, to marry you, to wed you. And Charlie Kirk saying that's good.
And no, seriously. And just be clear, that's why you're going to college, right? Don't lie to yourself. I'm studying. So
Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself and say that I'm a woman who can read. I can't. All women are illiterate, according to Charlie Kirk.
Theology. No, you're not. We know why you're here. And that's okay, actually.
It's so depressing to see just 14-year-old kids just smiling and laughing as Charlie Kirk tells them that you're not going to college to read books. You're not going to college to study. You're not going to college to learn something. You're not even going to college to party and hook up and bang a guy that plays a tambourine in a jam band, and you realize he wasn't even in the band. He's just a guy that brought a tambourine to a house party, stood on the side of the stage, and no one wanted to make him leave. You banged the guy because you thought he was in the band. You just banged a tambourine guy. It's not the best advice, not the best thing I've ever heard. Let's see what else that Kirk has to say.
And that's a really good reason to go to college, actually, especially an SEC school. Like, you will find a husband.
SEC is the Southeastern Conference, University of Florida, Kentucky, Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, things of that nature.
If you have the intent to find a husband at Ole Miss, it's just going to happen, okay? Or wherever. Yeah, there you go, see? Or at University of Alabama. But there you go.
I want to say something saucy, but I'm worried that if I say the saucy thing I want to say, it's not going to be provable and it'll be me being slanderous. But I would just bet that some of those schools have pretty high rates of bad stuff. Like maybe like sexual violence and stuff like that in some of those schools, because they kind of have dark party patriarchal cultures. I'm just worried that some of those schools have some dark stuff going on. Maybe I'm wrong. If you went to an SEC school, please let me know. I didn't bang the tambourine guy. I was the tambourine. I'm kidding.
But I always laugh because, and by the way, we should bring back the celebration of the MRS degree, which is, no, serious. I mean,
bring back the celebration of going to college for the sole purpose of getting married.
If you think about it, I say college is a scam, but if you're going to find your life partner, that's actually a really good reason to go to college. You have a bunch of people that are single, they're at the prime of their, let's just say attractiveness.
They're at the prime of their attractiveness. He talks like an alien who's hoarding humans as livestock to breed in a lab. He talks about humans like that while also trying to talk like a normal person. Charlie.
The dating pool is as robust as you'll ever find, and they all live together over a 4-year period.
But you can't have sex until you marry them.
You don't get much better than that, okay? It doesn't get better after college there. And so, yeah, you could go learn some stuff. That's fine, I guess, or whatever. Just don't listen to your professors. But
don't listen to your professors, because no one is more dumb than a bunch of nerds that have done nothing than read books and look at charts and graphs and go in the laboratory and play with chemicals at the expense of their social and personal lives. Listen to Charlie Kirk instead. And I'm not trying to say that every professor is inherently good. There's bad professors in the same way that there's bad cops, But again, the blatant disrespect for anyone who works in education is just very stupid and very bad.
That actually was the reason why a lot of women went to college in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Oh.
And it worked for a lot. Marriage rates have plummeted since that. So,
sociologist Charles Kirk says, actually, that's why women went to college in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I don't like that. I don't like that is a thing that he told people to do, but it's a good insight into the weirdness of this culture. Speaking of that, I got another thing for you guys. I got another thing that I think is similar in style to what we just looked at. Let me pull it up. Guys, Ted Cruz talked about theology a little bit. Let's see. Travis McConnell in the chat says, sorry if I'm late on this. Insane how we're like full on fascist and we're all, me included, just grumbling about swastika armbands while pulling them on. I don't know if we're putting them on yet, but I think I get what you're saying. Just catching up with the chat. Yeah, that stuff is, and I know that stuff is normal in evangelical culture, but it's wild to see that happening in actuality. It's wild to see Charlie Kirk speaking to a room full of teen women about that. I think I would okay, never mind. I almost made a joke that I think could get me in a lot of trouble, so I'm going to stop. I should have some like membership level where you get to hear all the jokes that would get me banned from this platform. So check out, and this is some World War III content. This is Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson's getting credit for just doing actual journalism. Tucker Carlson is getting some credit for asking actual questions to figures and not just filleting them while gently tinkling their back holes. But he goes a little hard on Ted Cruz here, which I think we can all enjoy because Ted Cruz is one of the worst. But they get into some theology, and I think it is, let's call it interesting. Travis, I'm sorry, I did not mean to make you jump.
Growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed.
I just want to say one thing off the bat. I'm not the biggest biblical scholar or anything in the world, but let's make it clear that when Israel is talked about in the Bible, it's not the state of Israel. It's not a nation state created by a bunch of other Western nations in the middle of the 20th century. Israel is what, like the tribe of Abraham, a certain lineage of people discussed in the Old Testament. That is what they're talking about in the Bible. Israel in modern context is just an apartheid nation state. That's not what the Bible is talking about. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those
Tucker Carlson there. I hate that Tucker Carlson said a thing that I like or that is relatable. But yes, he's pushing Ted Cruz here and saying, so is your theology literally that God in the sky wants you to bless the Israeli government?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of it, says the nation of Israel. So that's
people.
in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture.
That's in the Bible. So as a Christian, I believe that. So for Ted Cruz, again, Christianity, religion more generally, is if the book says the thing, you uncritically believe the thing.
Off the tip of my, you pull out the phone and use the
It's in Genesis. But so you're quoting
the casual, it's in Genesis.
Bible phrase. You don't have context for it and you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology? I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from?
I mean, I hate to do it. Yeah, someone brought up broken clocks in the chat. I hate to do it. But yeah, it's a good question that Tucker Carlson basically points out that he is meant to have Tucker Carlson is pointing out that Ted Cruz has a political theology, a system of belief that is grounded in a verse in Genesis about those who bless Israel, of course, in that context, talking about blessing a small, specific group of people. And he has extrapolated that to some sort of political theology where God wants us to directly bless the nation state of Israel and the Israeli military, that somehow that chunk of Genesis means that we should help Israel bomb Iran or something like that. I think that's kind of where he's going here. But yes, it's a weird day, guys, where we're kind of on Tucker Carlson's side. Ugh.
Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number
Biblically, we're commanded to support Israel. I don't think that means what he thinks it means.
two.
Well, hold on.
I'm not holding on.
Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But what?
He doesn't know what it means. He says things and he doesn't know what the things that he means says. Alex, thank you so much. Definitely some mixed fabrics right there. But a reminder that many people in positions of power say things and have no idea what they're talking about, specifically the use of the Bible and the use of Christianity more generally in American politics is often just a weird, uncritical proof texting for doing what one wants to do anyways, or for the raw seeking out of power. In this instance, Ted Cruz is basically saying it is good that our military potentially support the Israeli military in attacking Iran, which could become a World War III situation because of my misreading of a verse in Genesis that I'm giving to you uncritically, without context, and with no further understanding than just continuing to repeat the verse at you.
But hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is?
That's always the good thing when someone tells you to define something. Well, do you not know what it is? You fucking idiot. Come on.
That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking.
Okay, so Ted Cruz is now saying that Genesis in the Bible is referring to Israel, a country that was created in, I don't know, some of our grandparents' lifetimes.
Talking about
the nation of Israel, yes.
And so is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation.
I don't think, again, some of you know the Bible better than me. I don't think that in the Old Testament, Israel is like a nation or a nation. I don't think that the Israel of the Old Testament is a place with borders and walls. It's a people, right? Isn't that the whole point? Isn't that the whole point of the thing? That it's a people? That it's a people? And then eventually in the New Testament, Israel, or sort of the model of Israel as a people, becomes the church, and the church is a people. It's not a thing. It's a community, things of that nature. Again, I'm a little rusty on this stuff, but I'm pretty sure this is what that stuff means. Sam in the chat says, define Israel as a banger, honestly. Damn, Tucker. What a world where we're saying, damn, Tucker.
A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the descendants
God's
of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
And by the way, it's not run by Benjamin Netanyahu as a dictator. It's a democratic country that elected.
He's the prime minister.
Right.
So again, Ted Cruz still on this line of the Old Testament bless Israel thing is referring to the nation state. Let's see if I can find that verse. The phrase, those who bless, here, we can, I mean, here's what he was referring to right here. Let me move the screen over a little bit. The phrase, those who bless Israel will be blessed. Let me change this around. God, I'm a friggin' computer whiz. The phrase, those who bless Israel will be blessed, originates from Genesis, where God makes a covenant with Abraham, promising blessings to those who bless him and his descendants. So yes, we're literally just talking about the descendants of Abraham. This promise has been interpreted as a principle that God will favor those who support and show kindness to Israel. The verse is often cited in the context of Christian Zionism support for the modern state of Israel. So again, it's talking not about Israel as a nation state. We're talking about the descendants of Abraham. And it's important, if you guys don't know the world of weird and wacky American Christians, American Christian evangelical Zionists and politicians, I'm going to say a thing and you're going to think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. They believe that God is going to come back when there's a war in Jerusalem or whatever. So what they're basically doing is a sort of apocalyptic theological accelerationism, where if we can just get those guys to have a big war, Jesus will come back. It's like a cheat code or something. So all of this evangelical support for Israel is because they want that region of the world to go up in fucking flames, because they think when that happens, Jesus comes back down in a chariot and says, hey, it's me, guys. Hey, it's me. It's me. I'm back. It's me. I'm back. That's how Jesus talks in my mind.
But just like, America is the country run by Donald Trump. No, actually, the American people elected Donald Trump. The same principle
This is
there.
silly. I'm talking
It is silly because there's no conflation between the people of Israel and the people of America.
about the political entity of modern Israel.
Yes, and that is
You believe
Israel.
that's what God was talking about in
Yes.
Genesis.
So Ted Cruz says in Genesis, God, Hashem, Yahweh, whatever, he who will not be named, I am that I am. That he was, because again, for God, there is no temporality, right? We see temporality in this linear way, but God's up there for him. It's all one big picture. So the God of the Old Testament was referring to the contemporary nation state of Israel when he said, those who bless Israel will be blessed. He wasn't referring to the descendants of Abraham. We're basically going from saying like, yeah, the people that come from this one guy's jism to modern military nation state Iron Dome.
But
that country's existed since when?
For thousands of years. Now,
Oh, that's true. I don't think that's true.
there was a time when it didn't exist, and then it was recreated just over 70 years ago.
I'm saying, I think most people understand that line in Genesis to refer to the Jewish people, God's chosen people.
That's not what it says.
Well, I think it does. I think it is what it says. I'm having a new puberty over here reacting to this guy.
Okay, Israel, but you don't even know where in the Bible it is.
I hate that Tucker Carlson is doing stuff that we have to be like, God damn it, it's pretty good. Mellow Jello, what is up? Great to see you. That's all. That's how much I respect Mellow Jello in this community. So, a little bit of what's going on in the Christian world. You got Charlie Kirk telling 14-year-olds to go to college to get a man's. You got Tucker Carlson asking actual questions to Ted Cruz. Wow. Let's do one more little Ted Cruz hit, because I think it's what the people are really wanting. And then we'll get into some more serious stuff, because I know you guys are serious scholars and stuff like that. Again, if you're here, please do like the stream. Thank you so much for being here. Let's look at this real quick. It's from the same interview.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
Look at the Reagan thing behind them framing them. This is amazing.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
I mean, I hate it. I hate that Tucker's saying stuff that's creating these moments.
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah.
How could you not know that?
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Why is it relevant whether it's,
because
it's 90 million or 80?
I think if you're going to overthrow a government, you should know stuff. I think that's fair. I don't want to overthrow any government, so I couldn't tell you the population of one place. But if you want to overthrow a government, you should at least know the first 2 pages of Wikipedia. With browser normal settings, scrolling normally, you should know the information contained in the first 2 pages of a Wikipedia if you plan to topple a nation.
Million or 100 million? Why is that
because if
relevant?
you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
Various browns.
They are Persians and
What percent?
predominantly Shia. Okay,
it's not
okay.
even... You don't know anything about Iran. So
Okay,
actually,
I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
I mean, do I like when the boys yell at each other? No, I want the boys to hug, kiss, rub it around a little bit, but he should know. I think it's fair that he should know stuff. I think it's fair that you should know stuff. And so Mellow Jello makes a good point here, not just because they're Mellow Jello, because they're making a good point. I hate that Tucker plays his male goddamn fiddle. Why can't other fucking journalists do this shit? Yes. Yes. The problem is that a lot of other journalists try to play into their game, or they do this weird thing where, so you know how you're a little kid sometimes, and if your parents suck, and listen, my parents did this too, so no disrespect, but if you're a little kid and your parents suck, and you see a cop, and you're like, what's that? And they're like, it's a cop. And the cop tells you to do something. Your parents are, we got to listen to the cop. Why are you listen to the cop? Well, because the cop has power. The cop is good. They're just good. We just have to respect the cop. And you're like, but why? What did they do to earn that respect? Well, they're a cop. That's just a job, you know? Sometimes almost all the time, journalists do this to elected officials. They act like, oh, they're senators, so they know everything. No, most of these people are goddamn idiots. And pushing them to exhibit a baseline knowledge of the things that they should know to be able to do their job efficiently seems like a good thing to do. Again, I hate that we're doing this in terms of praising Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson isn't a good guy. He's not like secretly based or something like that. He's a bad boy. He's a very bad boy, but he did a good job in this particular instance. He didn't even do a good job. It's not a moral thing. He just did what one should do when interrogating those with power.
You're the one who claims anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country.
He responded with, "No, you don't know anything about the country. At least you knew the goddamn population, Big Chief." This is, and it's funny, except for that the guy who's talking, who's right there, could be involved in pressing some buttons that mean a bunch of people die.
You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump. You're the
I'm
one
not saying that.
who can't figure out if it was a good idea to kill General Soleimani, and you said it was bad.
You don't believe they're trying to murder Trump.
Yes, I do.
Because you're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. And if you really believe that,
we're carrying out military strikes today.
You said Israel was.
Right, with our help.
Got him.
I said we. Israel is leading them, but
Israel is we. We are Israel. I am thou. Thou is Israel. Thou is me. Me is Netanyahu. Get it?
we're supporting them.
Well, you're breaking news here, because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive capacity.
No, we're not bombing them. Israel's bombing them.
This is nuts.
You just said we were.
We got to rewind for a second. I hate to do this to you guys.
Denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting.
Right. With our help. Military strikes today.
You said Israel was.
Right. With our help.
You said Israel was with our help.
I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them.
Well,
Israel's leading them. We're supporting them.
You're breaking news here, because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive capacity.
No, we're not bombing them. Israel's bombing them.
You just said we were.
We are supporting
Israel. High stakes. You're a senator. If you're saying the United States government is
no. Tucker looks to the camera like Jim from The Office. Hold on, let's see if I can find this right moment. He has a full-on Jim from The Office moment where he's like, got him. And I mean, this is kind of a Jim and Dwight interaction when you really think about it. What we're basically watching is a Jim Halpert and Dwight Schrute interaction, except the stakes of it aren't like getting business from the Utica branch. The stakes of it are large-scale global war involving nuclear weapons. So basically the same stakes as The Office.
The United States government is at war with Iran right now. People are listening.
Okay, so that'll be the last time we look at Tucker Carlson for a bit on the channel, on the show. But yeah, Garrett in the chat said, did Tucker get a journalism degree after leaving Fox? It seems like he did. And again, we're not saying the Tucker Carlson is good. We're just saying that he did some baseline journalism stuff there. And because no one does journalism stuff, it seems so exciting when someone does journalism stuff. Speaking of journalism stuff, I've been doing journalism for a while to figure out, guys, this is going to be bad too. So tuck in for this. Okay. But speaking of journalism, I've been on a journalistic mission to get to the bottom of where the best cup of coffee in America is. And friends, do I got a scoop for you? It's Yes Please Coffee, the official coffee partner of Burns After Reading, the official coffee partner of Third Degree Burns, the official coffee partner of Burn Notice, the official coffee partner of Mob Mentality. It's the best coffee that I've ever had in terms of just like getting beans from a roaster. Every time I travel now, this happened when I was in Montana last week, all the coffee tasted like dog shit because I'm used to drinking Yes Please. 20% off with the code Burns Beans. It's all in the description. But if you want to live the Burns lifestyle, then get yourself some Yes Please coffee. And if you want to live the Burns lifestyle, also find a deep source of existential despair and depression that no amount of medication or psychotherapy will cure. Our boy Sean in the chat, he just got his Homestar delivered. That's the espresso. And I'm pretty sure the code probably works once. I don't think you can use the same code for the same email multiple times. So if you do that, if you use it, get a few bags. Okay, so I want to talk about something now that is a little more important, a little more high stakes than what we've been doing. Let me pull this up. Let me do some high-level production. Let me basically be the genius that I am. So one of my favorite writers who talks about, the odd parts of American evangelical culture and Christian culture is Sarah Jones over at New York Magazine. I think she's arguably like the best person to do it. So she wrote a thing on Christian nationalism. This came out yesterday. And I'll post a link in the chat as well in case anyone wants to check out this article. So in case you want that there. Hellraiser your flashlight. Thank you so much. Enjoy your exploitation. Enjoy it because it's all we got, right? It's all we got. So Sarah Jones's piece is called "The Spiritual Warfare of Vance Bolter and Accused Assassins' Religious Convictions Are Not Unusual in American Life." Article starts, by the time Minnesota police captured Vance Bolter, alive in 10 minutes from his home, he allegedly killed the Democratic lawmaker and her husband and injured another along with his spouse in a personal crusade. Like, this is scary shit. It's scary shit that someone's out there hunting democratically elected officials for ideological motives. And there's a bunch of bullshit. Maybe we'll get into this right off the bat, where this, of course, when stuff like this happens, people want to paint it as like a leftist radical. It is not. A childhood friend and roommate told reporters they were prone to fantasy, liked to play army men. He found Jesus as a teenager. He liked Donald Trump and InfoWars and hated abortion. He founded a ministry and a private security company with his wife. Only go to church if your pastor also runs a private security company is a thing that I always say. He managed a 7-Eleven. He picked up bodies for local funeral homes. That's intense. I mean, this really does more and more, and this is a tease for a video I'm working on right now. More and more, all of these guys sound like unfunny Connor O'Malley characters. It is not hard to imagine Connor O'Malley being a character. His name is Chip from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, who manages 7-Elevens and picks up bodies for funeral homes. That's literally like a Connor O'Malley character, but it's a real guy. Sometimes he went to Congo, where he pursued projects and preached in a church. Videos of his sermons resurfaced online. He spoke of Christian joy and preached against LGBTQ plus rights. It says God will raise an apostle or prophet to correct their course, he said of American churches. When police discovered his car, they discovered a list of apparent targets that included abortion providers and pro-choice activists, along with other Democratic lawmakers. So to be clear right off the rip, what we know about this guy is that he was motivated by a mix of right-wing Christianity and conspiracy theory to do acts of violence. Yeah, John, Wisconsin was mentioned. Oops. Matthew, thank you so very much. I will buy my child a coffee. When I take her to the doctor later for caffeine overdose, I'm going to be like, but it was a super chat. And the doctor will be like, it's okay. I only go to Italian doctors. I highly recommend you only go to Italian doctors. His rhetorics make him a familiar character. He's not the first American missionary to preach hate in an African church, nor to be the first Christian to kill on behalf of the fetus. Eric Rudolph hid in the North Carolina wilderness for years after he bombed Centennial Olympic Park, a gay nightclub, and 2 abortion clinics. I mean, basically, this is the thing. This is the thing that guys do. Religion is often a motivating factor, and Bolter's apparent convictions offer another preliminary glimpse into his radicalization. And there's some stuff we're going to get into because there's another article about this we can talk about. But he attended Christ for the Nations Institute, which is a charismatic Bible college in Dallas. Someone who went to a kind of weird Christian college, I can confirm that these places exist and that they're bad and that they're sort of becoming, little institutions for radicalization. It's very funny that, to call back to something we talked about earlier, that Charlie Kirk doesn't want people to go to Christian colleges. Isn't that exactly what he wants people to do? Isn't that like the exact thing that he's striving for? I kind of don't get why that's not a bigger thing for him. The school counts among its alumni the evangelist Dutch Sheets. That sounds like the name of an adult film actor from Utrecht. Utrecht, is that it? A prominent figure in the new apostolic Reformation movement who speaks of apostles and prophets. It's a movement that's mostly decentralized, but its adherents have some core beliefs. People of God are caught up in a dramatic spiritual warfare with the forces of Satan. Not super far from some of the Ted Cruz stuff where we imagine ourselves as geopolitically involved in situations that are pleasing to God. Like we're starting the good war so that God thinks we're good boys. Let's see. Yeah. And in an episode of the far-right Flashpoint program released after the October 7 attacks in Israel, Sheets spoke of a nefarious principality and a spiritual war against evil. Again, these people are obsessed with using anything that happens in Israel or the Middle East as the excuse for more or less doing either like intellectual or physical spiritual terrorism. On Saturday, the journalist Jeff Charlotte published a photo of the Institute's lobby, which reads, "Everyone ought to pray at least one violent prayer per day." That sucks. I don't think we should pray one violent prayer a day. I mean, one of the things that stands out to me about all of this is coming of age in a post 9/11 world. Like I was in high school after 9/11 happened. Again, I didn't do it. The narrative that came, or the sort of dominant narrative in American life after 9/11 was that Islam was an inherently violent religion. It's a religion that wanted to control women, that had these horrible patriarchal gender roles, that wanted an all-out war against those that weren't like it, et cetera, et cetera. That's all the stuff that we see now. You know, a lot of the Christian violence we're seeing in America, we could be glib and call it like white ISIS or something like that, but it embodies so many of the principles that we were seemingly fighting against in our ongoing war in the Middle East as we defended the West. You know, they're doing all this. They're doing the stuff that they said was the bad stuff to do. This is a theme, of course, we note in all types of guys these days. The bad guys are always doing the stuff that they said that they weren't going to, they said they weren't going to do. Shout out to Corona Extra. Maybe in July, should my goal be by the time this show has a name, I will put an ad blocker on my browser. Millions of Christians believe in spiritual warfare. For most of them, prayer is where it ends. And, you know, spiritual warfare, a concept I was aware of when I flirted with the evangelical world, was more just like, at least as I understood spiritual warfare when it was introduced to me by like weird youth pastors who went on to marry 18-year-olds, was something like, there are forces of evil that exist in the world that want you to be bad and jerk off. So every time you want to jerk off, that's Satan trying to do spiritual warfare on your penis. And you pray to resist the urge to jerk off. And when you pray to resist the urge to jerk off, you have won spiritual warfare or something like that. You know, like the temptation to sin is a sort of spiritual war, and we must fight back against that. I'm not saying that's good, but I'm saying that just leads to 14-year-old boys not jerking off to cope with the trauma of 9/11. It doesn't lead to them doing terrorism, as far as I'm aware of. Sarah Jones, the author, says, I grew up with similar ideas in an evangelical congregation where no one spoke in tongues or laid hands on the sick. And I can still recall Ephesians 6:12, which says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The author, Jones, became an atheist, not a terrorist. And although that's more common than Bolter's trajectory, I don't think spiritual warfare is an innocuous belief. It is apocalyptic in character and profoundly conspiratorial because it adds a demonic dimension to worldly tensions. And, you know, she gets into this in the piece, but it does make one think of QAnon and the InfoWars world and how people attach a cinematic, conspiratorial, spiritual intensity to social and political conflict that makes them act hella crazy. Just hella crazy. Shout out to my Northern Californians. Let's see. Long before QAnon, the Christian author Frank Peretti published a popular novel called This Present Darkness. In it, angels and demons battle for a small college town through various human proxies. A liberal professor is working for Satan, and there's a redheaded angel with a Scottish accent. Nice. In a more serious turn, demons force women and children to make false accusations of sexual abuse. Scholar Julie Ingersoll wrote in a 2022 paper that in Peretti's imagination, we all inevitably play a part in the looming and raging cosmic battle. And you know, some of us have watched movies together, like the God's Not Dead films. We're aware that in evangelical culture, it's quite common to, again, present like social and political conflict as if you're waging in some sort of large scale spiritual warfare, which all the professors just want to do Satanism to your kid or whatever. Saw Karen Reed found not guilty. You know, lies live news updates in the chat. Just catching up. Just catching up. Disabled Danny wants to say hi and plug my channel. Check out Disabled Danny's channel. I hope that was good, Danny. I hope that was something. I hope it was something. Let's see. So for authoritarians, spiritual warfare is a useful notion. Their political opponents aren't simply misguided. They're agents of the devil, and their humanity is questionable. Again, because this means when you're mad at someone, when you have an opponent, it's not just like that person has a different interpretation of scripture than me. That person has a different set of political ideals than I do. No, that person is working for Satan. That person is an evil agent for the devil. And I'm not just fighting against them at the level of ideas. I am killing satanic forces. That's what it leads people to think that they're doing. And of course, a certain type of person, when they're in these weird ideological rabbit holes, come out of the rabbit holes ready to kill people because they think Satan is everywhere. Bolter's Christianity did not force him to kill, but it did give him permission to act. And although he's accused of carrying out an assassination campaign by himself, he's not in the broadest sense alone. In the run-up to Obergefell, I saw a man blow a shofar outside the Supreme Court, and I laughed. After the decision came down, I forgot about him for a while. I distrust liberal triumphalism, but I did think maybe there'd be some breathing room. Trump won the presidential election just over a year later, and I remembered the shofar and what it means to some Christians. In the book of Joshua, the Israelites sound them as they besieged the city of Jericho. The Israelites, being a people, shouts to Ted Cruz. Hopefully the audio is okay. It's getting really loud outside for me. Blah, 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 blah. But she goes on to say, but sometimes there's a man like Bolter who decides that prayer is insufficient and that voting is no good as long as liberals can still do it. CNN reported on Monday night that he texted his family after a shooting spree. Dad went to war last night. He stopped playing army men. Now he's in it for real. Dad went to war last night is the thing that this guy said after he started murdering public officials. Oh boy. Zavi in the chat said, I want to ask you something about South American politics. I don't know anything about them, but you could do it. Anthony Paul Smith, who's going to be on in a second, says, y'all got to read This Present Darkness. And guys, when the professor is speaking, here, I'm going to send Anthony Paul Smith a link right now. So in a little bit, he can pop on and join us. In 10 minutes or so. Let's see. Okay, so I want to look at one more thing related to what we are talking about right now. So this is from Kiara Butler at Mother Jones, who's done a lot of really good writing on Christian nationalism and the movement around it. Kiara Butler had a piece that came out maybe 6 months ago on the Theo Bros, which was really informative about some of the theological sources motivating a lot of these folks. They're acting pretty froggy these days. And just a reminder, if you're here, you're on time, and your family, please do like the stream. It helps me out when you do. If you don't subscribe to both channels, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. Please subscribe. Helps me out a good amount. I'm going to do a quick thing right now before I forget. But if you are watching on the main channel, do subscribe to the side channel where soon will be the main home of streams and where I'm posting shorter videos and clips and stuff like that. So in this article, Butler says, Saturday, a gunman impersonating a police officer fatally shot Minnesota State Rep Melissa Ortman, her husband, at their home, and wounded Senator Mark Hoffman, his wife, at their home. Fucking A, man. Among the details about the suspect beginning to emerge is that he reportedly attended a Bible college that is a stronghold of the New Apostolic Reformation. The New Apostolic Reformation. It's a charismatic movement that teaches that Christians are called to take over the U.S. government. You have to do a lot of reading in a very particular way, I think, to read the Christian Bible and think that your goal is to take over the U.S. government. I guess in the same way that Ted Cruz misreads a line in Genesis and thinks that we got to bomb Iran or whatever. Founded in 1970, Christ for the Nations Institute, located in Dallas, Texas, boasts having graduated more than 40,000 students from over 170 nations. It's also the alma mater of several leaders of the NAR movement, including at least one who was involved in the lead up to the Capitol insurrection on January 6th. This brings up Dutch Sheets again, who we talked about in another thing. since we already know about him. Another Stop the Steal leader, Cindy Jacobs, was honored by Christ for the Nations early this year. She's a faith advisor. Oh, it's President Trump. That's so great. She participated in the Jericho March of December 2020 when election protesters marched around the U.S. Capitol, Supreme Court, and Department of Justice 7 times, praying for the walls of corruption and election fraud to fall down, just as Joshua and the Israelites walked around the walls of corrupt Jericho. Like, can't these people just read scripture as metaphor? Can't they understand that sometimes ancient texts are just metaphors about human behavior, and you don't have to literally pray outside a government building and make the walls fall down? Can't they get that? Can't they understand that? Guys, speaking of prayer, everyone right now, stop and pray for Eddie's hiccups. Let's see if God is real. If all of us right now pray that God heals Eddie from his hiccups and Eddie stops having hiccups, then we all need to become spiritual warriors for the tribe of Israel or whatever. So everyone right now, think, please, God, I'll lead us in prayer. Dear God, please help Eddie stop having hiccups so he can feel more good and not want to, in his words, fucking die. I said in his words because I did not want God to think that I was doing cusses. Texas pastor and podcaster Joel Webbin, real piece of shit, has also said he attended Christ for the Nations. He's an outspoken member of the Theo-Bro movement. He doesn't like that there's immigrants in his community. He says a lot of people are going to be surprised when you're spending eternity worshiping Christ next to Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee and Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield and Martin Luther King Jr.'s in hell. That's just bold. It's bold to say that you think Martin Luther King Jr. is in hell. Beyond Butler, 57, having said he attended Christ for the Nations Institute, little's known about his religious faith. The college did not respond to a request for comment from Mother Jones. So again, sharing this simply to paint a picture here that there is unfortunately, like a broader theological movement in the United States of America that convinces people like the Minneapolis shooter that we are engaged in a sort of spiritual and theological warfare, and that it is one's job as a man of faith to take things into their own hands, to be a sort of evangelical Chuck Norris of sorts, and kill the devil or something like that. It's not the best. We don't love it. I don't think it is particularly good. But something to think about with all of this, or a question at least I have, a thing I think about is, how much of this is legitimately connected to Christian theology and belief? How much of this is biblical, for lack of a better term? And how much of it is people with kind of authoritarian or fascistic desires for power reinterpreting or rereading a text that everyone has agreed is good to justify the horrible things they want to do? I'm going to give you an example. I went to a Christian college where people in general believed that you should not have premarital sex. But I once knew someone who did sex in the butt, and they were like, I think I'm good because the Bible doesn't talk about having sex in the butt. So God is cool with the fact that I did. And listen, if you're having sex in the butt, shout out to you. But, people get so obsessed with this book that they have to either work around it to like trick God, or they have to find weird elements of the book that somehow justify the stuff they want to do anyways. Like the person I'm referring to, they could have just had sex if they wanted to have sex, whether front, back, side to side, whatever they wanted to do. But they felt a need to have like a biblical justification or lack thereof. In the same way, a lot of these folks just like want to do fascism or totalitarianism. A lot of people want to empower their white brethren. A lot of these people want to do Nazi stuff. And rather than being able to loudly and proudly admit that, they have to cloak it in some weird biblical interpretation to somehow justify that thing. If any of you went to Christian college and did sex in the butt so that God wouldn't get mad at you, please do let us know. in the chat with your name. Anna says, can you tie it back to a major philosophy concept? God damn it, Anna. I'm not totally sure if I can. I mean, I guess like we're just talking about how people use various ideologies to construct how they view the world and construct themselves and their place in that world, right? And how in this case, what seems to be like spiritual warfare or concepts that people are taking from the Bible, or like, you know, Ted Cruz serving Israel, all these things are just serving the power of empire, right? So people feel like they're engaging in some spiritual warfare or battle or whatever, but then you have the Ted Cruzes of this world driving that energy towards serving the military projects of America. And it wasn't my best, but I tried. Guys, I'm going to bring a guest on now, a truly very smart person, a person who has made me feel, not in a malicious way, has made me feel dumb many times in my life because of how smart they are. They are a professor and the chair of the religion and theology department at LaSalle University in Philadelphia. It's a city on the East Coast of the United States. They are Anthony Paul Smith. I'm going to bring them on to the screen. Hey, hold on. Oh, no, I got to switch it so we're both there at the same damn time. Okay. Let me do this. I'm really good at technology. Awesome. And you're in front of books so people know that you're smart.
This actually is in my home. It just happens to be the room that I set up in, but I'm in Edinburgh. My partner has a fellowship here, so we're subletting from another academic.
That's a smart person place. Edinburgh is a place where people it's a smart person place, it's a funny person place, and it's a drunk person place.
It's very, yeah. I forgot the vague sense of menace that just accompanies you when you go out in the UK, because it's not because anyone's going to rob you. It's just some dudes might fight you because they want to fight, and that's it. It's different.
Yeah. Shout out to anyone who's Scottish in the chat. Let us know what you think about that. But yeah, definitely, I feel like in a weird way, living in Scotland was probably a statistically less dangerous place than many other places I have lived, but a place where I more often than not had to like dart to the other side of the road or avoid eye contact because it felt like stuff could get real froggy for no reason.
Yeah, and we're just down the road from where you did your PhD. So
amazing. We love it, guys. We love Scotland. So one of the reasons you're here is to talk to us about Christians doing violence. And you sent me a book chapter you wrote, which was very good, by the way.
Thanks.
It was very, I liked how it was set up. It was funny, but then when I felt like it was funny, that you then made me feel bad because you were like, no, but this is serious, which is effective, pedagogically. But the piece you wrote was on white Christian violence. And I think a thing that a lot of us have wondered, like, I think folks have always associated or Christianity with a certain form of violence. You can always pull back to like the Crusades. You can pull back to those who are on the wrong side of the civil rights movement. You could look at Klansmen who used faith as a veil for what they were doing. But I think more and more it feels like some of the very sketchy and scary stuff being done by the United States government and military is at least in essence meant to be fulfilling some sort of Christian mission. And more so than we've seen in a while, we have like rogue violent actors who claim Christianity as one of the mechanisms by which, or one of the mechanisms of motivation. And I'll let you, I don't want to read this paper to you, but I wonder if you could say a little bit about what you see as at the root or as the root of some of this type of violence.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, I do want to say thank you for having me on. For those who don't know, we've been friends for too damn long. I think like
don't say it,
20 years.
Don't say it.
Yeah, okay.
Because that means that we've been alive that long. But yes,
I know.
I'll give context, guys. I first met Anthony in the summer of 2007. Okay, so not quite 20 years. Anthony at that point was just about to start a PhD at the University of Nottingham, where I went to do a master's degree. And, if I had to say the top 5 or whatever people that sort of influenced me intellectually or motivated me throughout my life, Anthony's definitely one of those people. But yes, we go go way back, and we've both seen each other at various points extremely drunk.
Yeah, that was the drunkest day of my life, actually, that night that I met you.
It's always good to get to meet someone in that context, and look at you now, surrounded by books.
Yeah, of course.
And make sure before you leave as well. Yeah, I was going to say before you leave, I want to plug your music too. I want to make sure people go listen to some of your mixes before they go. Cool, so I'm saying that out loud so I forget. Keep going.
No, that's cool. But I just want to say it's really cool to see you doing this. So,
thank you.
And I've really enjoyed the last hour. So, actually, I think I can start by piggybacking a little bit on your discussion of Ted Cruz and the reading the Bible, for example. So there's a book called The Book of Jerry Falwell. It's an anthropology and ethnography of the community around Jerry Falwell, Liberty University, the Southern Baptist Convention. And that's not quite the violent wing of Christian nationalism, but these are all part of a kind of engine that produces this kind of Christian violence. And in that book, she traces the way that evangelicals of this particular variety, I mean, evangelical as a word, is a little bit slippery, but of this particular variety, the way they read the Bible is to insert themselves into the narrative. The whole thing is about drawing you, the individual, into the narrative. And in some ways, that could be radical. And that's why you have so many evangelicals now who are ex-evangelicals, perhaps, who are leaving the church because they took seriously the shit their parents taught them. But it can also lead to really wacky stuff like you saw with Ted Cruz. So the idea that he is reading Israel as a contemporary nation of state of Israel, that's a really common form of reading the Bible. Is it a good way of reading the Bible? I would say we could use a biblical principle and judge them by their fruits. No, it seems pretty bad. But it's definitely really common, and it's part of the culture. So it's interesting to see Tucker Carlson, who is also a Christian white nationalist, but he's an isolationist Christian white nationalist who seems to kind of not want to bring the apocalypse, unlike some other Christian nationalists. It's interesting to see him push back on that. But okay, so you have this reading of the Bible, which is incredibly individualistic, and so there is a classic study, and I do talk about this in the book chapter. I can pop the link in the private chat here for the book if people want. But
pop it there, and then I'll put it in the main chat.
If people want to, they can also go to my website, which is my full name at .net. And they can get like the free version there. But there's a classic text in the study of religiously motivated violence, which is the term this guy uses, Mark Juergensmeyer, who's a professor at one of the UC schools. I can't remember which one. I also don't particularly like his reading. He's a kind of classic liberal reading of Christian violence. And in there, though, he does a good job of kind of looking at a number of different religious traditions, including Christianity. And what you see there when he looks at Christian nationalism in the 90s, especially around Timothy McVeigh and a guy named Michael Bray, who people might not know, but was associated with a series of murders of abortion doctors. And one of the things he notes there is that Christian nationalists want to break down the division between church and state. But their theology is completely individualistic. It's very subjective. It's a kind of hyper-Protestantism, or a kind of Protestantism unmoored from any kind of, I don't know, you could say collective check. And so the church they want to get back to is not the institutional church. And this is what we see really in the American government today. I mean, Donald Trump is not a Christian by any any
Yeah.
meaningful metric, right?
Because it seems like
he-
a thing where like he likes those guys like him, so
Yeah.
they like let them do stuff because he likes guys that like him.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And obviously, he would rather be a Christian than a Muslim,
Hmm.
or probably rather be a Christian than a Jew, even though his daughter is a convert. But he's just fundamentally a narcissist, right?
Yeah.
But the people who surround him, that's not that different of an outlook, because it's fundamentally subjective, it's fundamentally individualistic, and it's fundamentally based on one's own sort of conscience, or idea of morality, as they interpret it being given to them by whether it's the Holy Spirit, their reading of Scripture, any number of kind of Christian theological themes. And so the separation of church and state is not to get to an institutional church. It's to get to this vague Christianity. And really what you see when they're not sort of trying to own the libs, or literally going to court to ruin the lives of LGBTQ people and so on, is that they don't actually get along much in their little circles. There's a lot of factions within Christian nationalism that have a lot of disagreements. So Michael Bray, for example, he like you were talking about Charlie Kirk, who is I think the technical. Can you swear on this?
Yeah, you swear.
Yeah, I think the technical term is he's a fucking idiot, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
He's
Real dumb guy.
whereas Michael Bray, PhD in classics from Indiana University, I think, based his entire idea of this need to get back to a Christian identity. He rooted that in the work of Bonhoeffer, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian who gave up his pacifism to try and assassinate Hitler. Who's not? It's a cool thing to do. A cool kind of Christian violence, perhaps.
Yeah.
Really wild that you see right wingers now making some kind of link between them and Bonhoeffer. But also Reinhold Niebuhr, who was Obama said was his favorite philosopher. Don't know why I called him a philosopher. He's a theologian, but whatever. Used Niebuhr to talk about all this. So he's using pretty sophisticated intellectual tools. And then you have Charlie Kirk, who's just using like nihilistic internet speak, right? Or kind of working in that milieu.
And to touch on one thing you said earlier, just to connect this to some stuff I know I've talked about before, and the audience might connect with more than some of the specifically Christian stuff. When we talk about the emphasis on individualism, would you say like that's one of the reasons why in the last few years far right figures talk about like Marxism and socialism so much more than they used to? And in particular, anything that's not like inherently individualistic is quote unquote Marxist or whatever? Because like is the idea that anything that doesn't prioritize or create the space for that type of identitarian individualism is the enemy for these folks?
Well, so I think the Marxism thing might be slightly different, because the thing I'm diagnosing here, and other people have diagnosed here about the individualism, it's maybe it's better called like a subjectivism. Like it's about your personal relationship with the divine, and then you sort of join in a community of other individuals. So it's it's like this is a kind of classic. I'm going to use a fancy term, aporia, kind of classic block, a pit in conservative thought, which is it's incredibly individualistic, but it's also incredibly what's the word, conformist. Right. So you have Charlie Kirk telling women that there's one way to be a woman, which is like nuts. Like you can just like, it's empirically nuts. There's a million ways to be a woman. You just go look at a million women and you're going to find them living different lives. Right. So it's this sense that the conscience is primary. The individual conscience is primary. And that's a contradiction that ultimately breaks the conservative movement throughout history. So you have this conflict between the individual conscience and this idea, really not so much of a conformism of the group, but a conformism usually around a leader. So right now it's kind of Trump, and I've been doing some research on this. Not to go too far afield, but this actually looks like it goes all the way back to Hobbes.
Okay. Yeah.
Thomas Hobbes and the Leviathan. I'm stealing a little bit here from my partner's research, Marika Rose, who's doing stuff on Hobbes. But so
what are
good
partners
stuff.
if not for stealing their research and presenting it as our own? Am I right, fellas? Charlie Kirk would agree.
Yes. But it goes all the way back to Hobbes. This idea that there's this conflict between, like, where the individual has this personal conscience, but then there's ultimately a sovereign within. And for him, it was in the political realm, but it just gets murky and confused throughout time. And with Christian nationalists, it's almost like they're confronting the Hobbes problem and sort of intensifying it. Like whereas Hobbes was trying to get out of religious civil war, they're trying to create religious civil war so they can win. And so that their sovereign is the sovereign.
Yeah. And then when you say that, then is it a sense in which, for like the modern white Christian nationalist, that sovereignty then affirms their like their subjectivity, who they are? So the project is one of like putting their God or their faith in charge, such that they matter, that they win, that they have meaning. All right.
I think that all of this comes back to a kind of desire for meaning. Which, I mean, this is this is what I've tried to add a little bit with my argument around it, is that there's I call it a phobic structure. I'm taking that a little bit from the Martinican philosopher and psychologist Frantz Fanon, who talked about the phobic structure of race. So like the fear of the Black man, the fear of the Black person, as structurally important for white identity. So white identity is essentially constructed on not being Black and fearing being Black, where Black in white identity is associated with non-being or contingency, all these kind of things that classically in philosophy are scary or bad, and whiteness is being, and so on.
If I can quote you to you, in the book chapter, you write that the violence of the white Christian is, from their perspective, a defensive violence. Theirs is a violence ultimately taken up in the service of protecting a world created by colonial violence. And, thinking of that and what you're saying right now, and even putting it in the context of like the last week or so here in Los Angeles, this idea, when Christy Nomenclature or whatever came here to talk, and the narrative was basically like, we are defending the city for the West. We are defending it from the other. We are defending it from the brown socialist psychopaths from across the border. And it seems like a similar language being used, that like state violence, ICE violence, all these sorts of things are defensive, or they frame them as defensive, when I think the experience for most people is quite the opposite, that it is an offensive violence towards them without much justification.
So ultimately, what I think Christianity is doing for these people is providing a kind of identity. I do think that's sort of somewhat of a historical accident of the conflation of Christianity and Europe through colonialism, but it's as a historical accident, it's still actual, it's still real, and so Christianity is going to be the material that these people work with, the sort of the symbolic material, the fictive material that they try and create a narrative of who they are, what the world is, and so on. And so when Christianity, in their understanding, is attacked through Marxism, which says that the God isn't in the sky telling us what to do. Human beings are the ones who have to make the world. No one's going to save us, that sort of thing. That's a direct threat to their understanding of sovereignty, which is a direct threat to their sense of safety, their sense of being, their sense that they are a person who matters. They need, psychologically, it seems like they're grasping for some kind of um, uh, some kind of ground that they know is real and true, and that ground is usually created through some kind of violence of differentiating themselves from what they're not. So they're
Mhm,
not disordered. So
mhm.
this is why, like, in the book, or sorry, in the chapter, I talk about a kind of sexual aspect to this.
Yeah.
The obsession with a kind of masculinity that we see right now is really troubling because it mirrors exactly what we saw in the pre-Nazi period in Germany,
Yeah.
where
Can I
there's this real,
actually
yeah.
let me just quote your this is it's too good to not reference.
Okay.
I wasn't ready for you to quote Nick Fuentes in
Oh
this
yeah, yeah.
paper, and I'll just read the quote you have from Nick Fuentes here. I'm sure most people know who Nick Fuentes is. Says, if we're really being honest, never having a girlfriend, never having sex with a woman really makes you more heterosexual, because honestly, dating women is gay. And if you want to know the truth, the only really straight heterosexual position is to be an asexual incel. And I only bring that up because I think people, and some people watching it, probably like seen Fuentes
Yeah.
say that and just been like, oh, it's just like dumb shit. But what you're doing here is showing how that actually connects to something that's kind of fucked up, what you were about to do. So sorry to
Mhm.
interrupt that, but I wanted to give the
No,
point.
no, no. Yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, you guys should definitely go look that up. It's a clip online. I think I give a link to it maybe, but it's amazing. Because he says it so confidently, like he doesn't. He says it like it's the most normal thing in the world. And it, that's such a pathological position, right? It's like such a mentally strange
Yeah.
position, and you have the same thing with uh the men in the Free Corps, which were like the militias that sprung up before the Nazis took power. They're the ones that the Social Democrats partnered with to assassinate Rosa Luxemburg during the what was the revolution in Germany? I can't remember, the failed one.
Mhm.
And there's a really interesting book about them by this German academic whose name I can never say right. It's like Feelweight. It got really popular for a minute because some influencer wore a shirt with the cover. It's called Male Fantasies, which is
All
an
right.
amazing title. But Male Fantasies, it's a study of their writing, and what he finds is that they're like so afraid of being penetrated by anything. Like they, so there's obviously like a homophobia thing going on here.
Yeah.
And homophobia is a really good example when I'm talking about a phobic relationship here,
Mhm.
because what homophobia is usually about is not so much discussed at least a lot of queer theorists make this argument. It's not really discussed at like the homosexual act of men sleeping with men or women sleeping with women. It's actually the fact that you're confronted with the sense that your life could be different, that what your life is kind of a choice you've made,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and that, and one of the things you might suddenly be confronted with is like, oh, what if I want to get fucked as a man? And for a lot of men, that's a terrifying thought, that their desire might not be clear to them.
Well, yeah, I think
So
the silly example would be like the bro in high school or college. It's like, dude, I had a dream where Randy sucked my dick. What does that mean?
yeah,
And they
yeah,
have like
yeah.
an existential crisis because they can't comprehend that would be a possibility.
Yeah, and so with the sense of penetration, kind of what I mean there is I don't mean sexual penetration. And I know
Yeah.
it could be a word. I think someone in this chat even said it could be kind of a masculinist word, and that's fair. But partly what we mean is that the borders can be, the Free Corps guys write about borders being breached. They're
Mhm.
terrified of floods. They're terrified of women's menstrual cycles, which does
Yeah.
have some relationship to some stuff in religion that can be well, stupid, which I think it's okay to say this.
Yeah.
And terrified of floods of immigrants. And so this
Yeah.
imagery of the body, the border of the body, and the physical border of the nation are seen as kind of one through this kind of analogy. And oh, I'm sorry, Connor. I think I take your point. Yeah, actually, the most masculine place I've ever been at is places with gay men, and I mean that as like a positive thing. Like this is And there's a really good text on this called "Is the Rectum a Grave? Classic in Queer Theory" by Leo Bersani, that basically is like maybe men would calm down a little bit if they had sex with other men.
Fellas, try it and let us know next week how it goes.
Sorry, we got distracted by
The grave of the
queer
rectum.
theory, and what I think what happens with the Free Corps and with contemporary Christian nationalists is this fear that their identity isn't natural. It's not just given. And with that comes the fear that their place in the social hierarchy isn't given, isn't secured automatically, which is, what we see with Trump. So one of the things I argue in the book is that, in the chapter, sorry, is that Jürgens Mayer, this liberal theorist of religious violence, he can't really account for what happens when the people he is critical of take over the state. Because in the classic liberal understanding of religion and violence, religious violence is always lacking in authority. It's always what's the word? Sorry, it's a little later here.
No, it's totally fine.
It's lacking in authority. The violence of the state always is legitimate. So religious violence is illegitimate. State violence, it can be questionable, but there's always legitimacy to it. We see this a little bit with what's happening in Israel, Gaza right now, and so on. And this classic liberal thing, which annoys me. He definitely, it's interesting because we read his book, which it's gone through like 4 editions because it gets used in like every class on religion and violence. All the people he talks about in the 90s in Israel are in the government now in Israel. All the people he talks about in India in the 90s and early 2000s are in the government in India now. The people he talks about aren't in the government in America, but the ideas he talks about are very much the ideas that we all are confronting all the time as mainstream discourse now. And he can't account for that. He doesn't know what to do. And I think we don't fully know what to do either. But what you see when like Christy, whatever her name is, dog murderer, gets up and does this weird performance is you're seeing a deeply anxious person, right?
Mm-hmm. It's like a fear. That's the weird thing about it is it's when you watch these people speak, whether it's like a Hegseth or a Gnome or all these bad guys, they speak as if, or they speak with a confidence that they are like conquerors of the West, that they are the alphas, they are the good guys, they are the big dogs. But everything that's motivating it is this intense anxiety and fear that they are not the big dogs. That they're not in charge, that there is an other that's not like them. And it's I think one of the confusing things these days, seeing all this in the public discourse, is it's so obvious. Like and recently in Los Angeles, and people know this, everyone's talked about on the internet, but all that shit that happened was like a few blocks of one of the largest metropolitan areas in North America. And I live like 3 or 4 miles from, let's say, where the Waymos were burning. And like, the city was not under siege. People were just doing their boring shit and going to the farmer's market and buying matchas and eating tacos and whatever it is. But there's an anxiety that's just motivating all this. That's unconscious, that it's imagined, that it's not a material thing that they're referring to.
No, it's total fantasy. I just want to, because I see this in the chat. Yes, Army, Mando, Manny. That's the author. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce. I've gone to Germany so much, and I still can't pronounce these words. It's definitely that they're living in this constructed. They're living in their anxiety, is what I really think. They're living in a world created by anxiety, and that's why they're so weird. I mean, thinking about Tim Walz and how, I wasn't excited about Harris, but I was kind of excited. Maybe this is my own kind of personal feeling, but I was a little bit excited about Tim Walz, But his whole thing about oh man, me too. Just like and we're both. we're both Midwesterners a bit, right? So, or like have an appreciation of the Midwest, and he's got the thing about the Midwest where um, he has a really unanxious masculinity, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I was so the week before he got picked, I was in Minnesota in the woods at like my uncle's cabin, and I've said this on the show before. My family up there is like kind of like, like Midwestern liberal. They're by no means radical. They're Catholic or
yeah,
Lutheran. Some of them are even like people who have leaned centrist over the years. And when I brought up, what do you think about this Walz guy? People there loved him so much. And
yeah,
all the like old Minnesota dads thought he was the best precisely because he just like has like a calm, kind confidence to him. He's
yeah,
spoken a way that was like kind of no nonsense, no bullshit. And again, it was just the dumbest thing ever. This is a slight digression. When he did the weird thing, which connected with people so much, because I think it articulated what you're describing, that weird anxiety thing, and people like didn't know what to call it. It connected with people so much, and then geniuses that get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to advise candidates made him stop.
yeah,
Just the dumbest thing ever. But I think that really gets into something there.
yeah,
And I think and again too, like that weird thing where he was then painted as, this is like another thing I think a lot of us feel, which is an obvious thing, but you still can't not feel. When we were told for a while that JD Vance, the Yale graduate, finance capital, liberal elite, kind of effeminate dude, he was the alpha, and Tim Walz, the football coach who could fix his own car on the side of the road, who was just like a Midwestern farm dude, that he was some like liberal pussy. And we were
yeah,
just told that, and somehow we're like, in the same way that people again like Charlie Kirk is not a tough guy. Donald Trump is not a
no,
tough, classically, masculine guy, but we're again meant to believe
yeah.
that they
Well,
occupy some sort of like ontological masculinity that
yeah.
doesn't have to be able to chop wood.
And the reason I bring up Tim Walz in this context is, seeing his pain this week
Yeah.
at his colleague and friend being murdered
Yeah.
by this Christian nationalist, and then seeing the reaction from the current kind of form of Christian nationalism in the government from senators like Mike Lee, that was just
Insane.
it was just mean. It was just like
Yeah.
mean and
for those who don't know, Mike Lee's a senator from Utah,
yeah,
who tweeted some incredibly unkind things and referred to the guy as like a Marxist lefty or something.
yeah,
Joked about the shootings,
yeah.
just talked about it in
And,
very inhumane ways, and then like refused to apologize or take accountability when he was very wrong.
and the cruelty that we see with I think is in part a reaction. The violence that emerges out of the anxiety is in part almost like a self-soothing. It's almost like you're like, man, maybe you guys should just take like MDMA or some legal pharmaceuticals for your anxiety, because this is the way they're self-medicating is harming all of us. It's harming society. And with the cruelty, that's not a side effect in the violence of Christian nationalism. There's an enjoyment of punishment that we see in the writings of the Free Corps, but we also see going all the way back to Saint Thomas Aquinas, Catholic theologian and philosopher in the Middle Ages, who talks about how when we're in heaven, when Christians are in heaven, I'm probably not going, but when Christians are in heaven, one of the things that will make their enjoyment better is getting to go visit people in hell and watch them suffer.
Yeah. Crazy.
And so there's this sense that like this desire for that kind of destruction of the other as a way of shoring up one's identity, that gets thought about in Christian language, but I don't think it's necessarily Christian. I mean, one of the things you said that we were going to kind of think about was, is Christianity sort of necessarily tending in this way? I mean, I think that's a fair question.
And it's a thing I've like thought about a lot recently, because I still do find myself, and not to speak on your life, but another commonality that Anthony and I have are people that both at various points in life practiced Christianity in a more, I guess, like earnest and classical sense, have studied religion and theology, both as people with a foot in the practice of that faith and with a foot outside of the practice of that faith. And I often want to look at stuff that's happening and think like, oh, but this isn't what the thing is about. Like, this isn't what Christianity is about. Here's, it's if you are of a certain persuasion, like, you can just riff off verses about justice and charity and kindness and all this sort of stuff. And I was on like I guess like kind of lefty liberal ex-evangelical podcast the other day that got really weird. And a thing I eventually posited to try to create chaos was, this feeling of like, it feels like it doesn't matter anymore if I could say like, oh, well, these people aren't Christians because this is what the Bible says, or this is what a cool theologian that I like says, or whatever it might be. It feels like it doesn't matter if a majority of the people practicing that faith in America right now have chosen a sort of like violent political project as their thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm with you. I think that like the no true Scotsman fallacy that I'm sure people know about, like you can't just wish away what is actual, right? And so I definitely, my mother is the evangelical pastor. She has a pretty interesting life arc that I won't go into, but she becomes a pastor like later in life. And she's really struggled, I think, with this because a lot of people in the church are doing this kind of stuff, thinking this kind of way, and she thinks it's completely antithetical to how she understands her gospel, her religion. And so I do know there's like people out there that are actually troubled by this. And there's also one of the things that's really interesting in discussions about American religion, specifically Christianity, is like the mainline denominations just get people to pretend they're not real. Like they're not real Christians because they're not extreme or something. So evangelicals actually make up a pretty small subset of American religion. And they're also kind of shrinking from some of the stuff I've seen from Pew Research Center, because they're shedding some of their younger members who are, who I think get fed up by this kind of stuff.
It's very unfun.
But it has an incredibly outsized role in American life, and that there's some really good texts on this. Wild Faith is one that kind of traces the way evangelicals have been at this work, this political work, since desegregation of schools, and we're kind of living in like they want. They might. I think the interesting thing about when fascists win, I have a Woody Guthrie hat somewhere around here that says "All you fascists bound to lose," and I think it's important to understand that I think that's absolutely true. The fascists are going to lose. That doesn't mean we're going to win, because the thing is, it's a purely Spinoza statement. If they win, they lose. What they want is bad, is death. It's going to kill them. It might kill us too if they continue to win.
But you're basically saying like it's not a sustainable, life-giving, affirming project.
No, and I mean it's caught and it's not sustainable at the level of our psychology. It's not sustainable at the level of our politics. It's not sustainable at the level of environments. It's really horrifying just how these, like this guy who killed the two Minnesota lawmakers, he is not really an outlier anymore. I mean, they're not all, like, Christian nationalists aren't all picking up guns and going out and killing people yet, but there is a kind of sense that violence against your enemies in this culture has really become more acceptable.
And I think we've seen, like, whether it's QAnon shit or stuff like this, it's a very small number of dominoes that have to fall to get someone from sort of like normie dude who maybe listens to weird podcast to like guy that is planning an assassination. And it really feels like a part of the narrativization around all of this, and the sort of, it feels like the re-narrativization of the heroism of the West. And of course, I think a lot of people look at Obama and liberals as just like bending over and cucking themselves to the East or other nations, or letting China get a finger in. Whereas now the project is sort of the reintroduction of valor and heroics and people that like watch Yellowstone. I'll be honest, I haven't seen Yellowstone. I know people like it a lot. I don't want to hate on it. But I think like that's the scary thing, is how much some of the stuff that's happening now felt more fringe. And of course, like we've come of age in an era where we've already seen like school shootings go from a thing that happened once, however many years, to a thing that just happens on the reg. And I think that's one of the scariest things now. And I guess like a scary part about the psychology of all of this, which I think plays into some stuff you were talking about a little bit ago, is the obsession with like persecution and the use of persecution as an affirmation that one is doing it right. And the way in which it kind of, it's like a psychosis that fuels itself. Because it's like, oh, the more they're attacking us, the more that we're being threatened, the more that God is on our side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think that's just absolutely right. There's like you see it even with Trump, who's the president of the United States of America, who's like, oh, everyone's against me. Well,
because the thing doesn't work. Like the whole Trumpism thing stops working the moment it's like, no, we're just objectively in power. We are just objectively the ones who have won. And to get back to even like the gnome stuff and that anxiety, it's like we have to watch people who are objectively in power, who won. Like they are on top. There's no one above them. Continue to speak as if they are like anxious revolutionaries who are fighting against some larger system of power. Whereas the powerful then are like migrants that are complete without power, or trans kids without power, or like young, socialist liberal arts students who are objectively without power.
And this is one of the things that you see with the Christian identity movement, even in the 90s, is this reversal. I mean, it's perverse. It's like a perverse reversal of some of the most beautiful parts of the Gospels, right? So, like the first shall be last. The all these, this includes us, right? Like all these white Americans, rich Americans in general, are like, we're the ones who are going to inherit the earth because we're meek, and it's psychosis. I mean, it's psychotic to think that. When you're powerful, you're weak, and it's also kind of pathetic, like they can't even enjoy their power.
Like you have it, like have some fun with it,
Well, and what they enjoy is actually the idea that they're not in power, like Kristi Noem being like, we're going to take it back. It's like you run the federal government, like you're not
and to
you're
really
not the
like
Rebel Alliance or whatever kind of weird mythology they're constructing.
Well, and to sidetrack it slightly here too, I think with Trump and Noam and some of these folks, the power that they don't have that they still desperately want to an extent is like cultural power. They want to be like cool and hot and good. There's very silly stuff. Like there's like Mar-a-Lago face, the fact that all these people go to the same plastic surgeon near Mar-a-Lago, so they all look alike. There's the fact that, why is Trump so obsessed with punishing Los Angeles? Because he wanted to be a celebrity with the other celebrities for so long, and thought that the Home Alone 2, cameo was going to do it for him. And then Hollywood, and in fairness to him, all of these entertainment industry people were like on his ass for years, and then sort of created distance when it was bad for their bottom lines. But there's still so much of this too, where like there's just that resentment that cool people don't like them. And they can't get over it.
And that's actually, it's fascinating though, because it's happening at the same time that culture is no longer has the same capital that it once had. Balibar, the French philosopher Balibar, actually has a piece on this that it's really messed me up, actually, because he's basically like, the bourgeois no longer have a cultural product or project. So they're no longer, the rich, like in Silicon Valley, like the rich don't have like houses with art in it. They don't care about reading good books. They don't care about being seen as reading good books or liking good art. So that's waning, and it's really interesting that these like losers in like on the right are also now trying like desperately to be cool culture, when culture is just like reality TV, and which is probably full of their people anyway.
For sure.
Better than me.
Well, I know, I only know this because I still sometimes watch the TV show The Bachelor, and then people will go on Bachelor Reddit and figure out how many people on the show are just like pretty hardcore MAGA. And it's always very fun to watch them negotiate around that.
There was a question, that
I mean, I think it was kind of a funny one. Question was funny, but real like Anna Giselle saying, "I have a question with Juneteenth. Are you able to tie this back to Frantz Fanon?" I know that you can because your chapter's on him. So I mean, if you want to accept Anna's challenge, and I will say Anna as well. I said what French philosopher on Balibar. I'll type the name in the chat.
Etienne.
I'm not gonna say it. I'll say it wrong. You guys will make
fun of me. He's got an actress daughter, which is the French version of a nepo baby. Is your dad's a Marxist philosopher? So so I think Frantz Fanon gives a really prophetic vision to us in his book Wretched of the Earth,
highly recommend
which is a line from the Internationale, which in the original French, it looks more like the damned of the earth. So it actually has a kind of theological resonance to it. In Wretched of the Earth, there is a chapter called On Violence. And On Violence, there's a lot of different readings of On Violence that are out there. So I'm going to give a particular take. So just so people know, there are other takes. But the take I have is one, he never tells us what violence is in the chapter, which is really interesting. He never tells us directly, didactically what violence is. And what he instead does is he gives us a sort of like structural, phenomenological, descriptive, description of violence through a kind of historical outworking and process that's also psychological. And so a lot of times people look at this as kind of like handbook for revolution. I don't think it is that. I think it's actually just like almost like a metaphysics, an ontology. Like this is the being of, this is what happens. This is the actuality of violence.
So would you say, and this is, a text that I've read a good amount, not recently, but I think there's like a maybe more common way that people read that, which is almost, and I think this is what you're kind of arguing against, saying something like, here's violence. We know, we assume we know what violence is. Violence is used by the colonizer on the oppressed and on the colonized subject. The colonized subject then learns that violence is associated with power. Thus, when the colonized uses violence as a way to try to gain power, we should not like morally judge them, because it reminds me of like the drug commercial from the 90s. Like, I learned it from you, Dad. So I think there's a sense in which people like read it that way. And I think a lot of people too have read that text as a sort of, if not full-on justification for a type of political violence, at least a problematizing of the idea that violence is whole stop bad or something like that.
For sure. I think that, and I do think he's telling us not to judge violence in a simplistic moralizing way, because violence will only be, I think he's correct. Like, he has a kind of physics of violence happening here. Violence, it has to be met by a greater violence to stop it. And this is true historically. I mean, it's one of the things that scares me about our present moment. I'm not going to be the one that does it, but I honestly don't see a way out of this current situation without political violence against agents of the state. I think historically that's what we see happens. And I know people will like say, well, what about nonviolence? Nonviolence is almost always in a dialectic historically with violence. So, for every march to Salem, am I remembering my civil rights history? For every, we have like the burning of Detroit. And for every Gandhi, we actually had a lot of violence in India, being taking down the English, the British.
I mean, it's very, you have to live in the realm of pure fantasy to be able to imagine. And this is unfortunate. Like, this sucks. I don't think this is cool. I don't think this is like good. But there's not historical precedent for some peaceful liberatory movement where we go from, the verge of totalitarianism to some sort of humanist socialist utopia.
Well, I also don't think you have you get ICE agents to stop doing this unless they're scared, or ashamed. I mean, I'm a big proponent of bringing back the political affect of shame, So with Fanon, though, I think what he traces in that chapter is the fact that the violence that is emerging um, uh, through, like, from the organs of the state now in service of Christian nationalism is going to probably call forth some kind of response of violence, or the alternative is pretty scary, which is they win. And so Fanon, one of the things though that he also does, so that's the kind of negative or the depressing aspect of of his text, I think. His really positive sort of constructive aspect is to call us not to old stories, but to find some way to actually sit in what I'm thinking of as decoherence, to sit in what like much more poetically Cornell West calls like the shit and piss of life, of
Yeah,
birth.
yeah.
Like we're born in the muck and the mire, and it's really to look at, I think, and I think people in the uh, Black radical tradition in America and the Black Panther Party, but also people throughout the decolonial struggles in Africa, point to this in ways that are under engaged with, and really profound. What does it mean to try and find a new way to speak about power that isn't about winning, that isn't about securing a self, that isn't so anxious. And one of the things that makes that difficult is we actually have to deal with our shit. We have to take responsibility, I think, those of us on the left, for realizing that this stuff is probably in us too. And so one of the things I think about with Fanon that's really powerful is in Wretched of the Earth. He has this incredibly phenomenological descriptive chapter on violence, and then it's bookended by these studies, these psychological case studies, because he was treating people during the Algerian war, both the sort of guerrilla war and then the full revolution. And in those case studies, he's looking at what this violence did to people, both because he's treating the colonizer, because he takes his job seriously. He's an ethical man, Fanon. He wants the colonizer out. He might even want him dead, based off of some of what he says. But he still takes his duty as a psychologist really seriously, and he's treating some of these oppressors. And he's like, look how
Yeah.
look what they've done to themselves, is probably what he's saying. And then he looks at what the violence, the revolutionary violence, does to the revolutionaries too. And it's not pretty. It's not like I know sometimes in my students will often talk about revolution all the time, which is really funny because they're not very political, and they're also, whatever. It's just kind of silly. And I see it online, and I used to talk about it too in like a way that I think was probably a little bit silly, a little bit kind of replacing my spirituality probably. But the truth about revolution is that these are moments of extreme stress, I guess would be one way to think about it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I'm kind of a big, not defender, because it doesn't need to be defended, but fan of the show Andor. And I think something that show does really well is it shows the lives of people participating in the early stages of some form of revolution, and like they're really fucked up, and they're not like happy people, and stuff's not going good, and they have PTSD and trauma and anxiety and tension, and they treat people like shit in many instances. I think that kind of flies in the face of whether it's like more like the Star Wars movies, where the people that beat the Empire are just like happy and good and all that sort of stuff. And I do think there's a sense in which it's hard to not want to, whether consciously or unconsciously, imagine some sort of left-wing movement where we're all like happy at the protest together, and we're doing the good thing, and we're having our beers afterwards, and we have like cool merch made for whatever movement we're a part of. That's much easier to imagine than the reality that you describe and that Fanon describes in this
Yeah.
text, which I do think if anyone reads that book, and I say this is someone that the first few years I owned that book, I probably just read the on violence thing over and over.
Yeah.
And when you read those studies, I think it's really important. And I think that's where sometimes people can like maybe forget that Fanon is like a practicing psychiatrist and think of him more as just like a, political theorist, but the psychiatry stuff is really important and gives him a POV that others might not have.
Yeah. And I do think there are movements that like are pretty aware of this kind of stuff. So like the Zapatistas, I think they're pretty good. Like in terms of, I'm sure they're not perfect because nothing's perfect, but it seemed like there was real attempts structurally to try and account for some of this stuff. Even someone like who was wielding state power, and so obviously engaging in stuff that's going to, be bad in some sense, right? Like Chavez. I think there's a sense there too that like the joy has to be a part of it, but that it's not just automatic. So he created, or even like a person I don't always love. I'm not like a Maoist, internet Maoist, like who's into anime, like a lot of what I see on my timeline these days. But one of the things Mao did was, people would talk about the gray ants because everyone was wearing these kind of gray jumpsuits. That was partly because they had a shortage of the materials needed to make colorful clothing, and so they privileged that for children in order to try and make their life better. And so stuff like that, where I'm not like little examples of ways that you can kind of structurally maybe attend to this.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, it's great, and I know it's getting late your time, so let me pivot. And speaking about joy, the fun thing about Anthony, guys, you're looking at someone you think is a professor. He has his shirt's buttoned, there's books behind him, but you also are a musician and a DJ. And also share me in the private chat. What's the best link to send? Is it your SoundCloud?
Yeah, I can send that to you.
This is a question I'm just curious about. So yeah, guys, especially if you, I know that you regularly DJ in the Philadelphia area when you're at home. Is that fair?
Yeah.
What do you find a connection between? Well, okay, so we're talking about like joy and the necessity of finding pockets of that, and I think even some people probably have a sense of, there's this feeling maybe of like, hey, I'm trying to be a good guy. I read this stuff. I engage with the news. I think critically about things. I show up at the marches. This feels bad. Am I allowed to feel good? I'm just wondering if you feel at all. Wow, he's got dope tats. He does. He's a tatted up fella. Do you feel any connection between like music and DJ stuff? And
and my intellectual work?
Yeah, or even just like how, because you are also a late in life convert to being a DJ. So I'm just curious to like how that happened and how you think about that in the context.
I think you're partly using DJ as a metonym for person who parties too, and that's fair.
Listen, you said it. Well, everyone.
And that's absolutely right.
As a DJ at Christian youth camps.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I think you saw this a lot, and it can be a dead end. Obviously, like Deleuze and Guattari write about that. But I do think for me, I'm not an atheist. Like people, sometimes my students are trying to always figure out what my religion is, and I'm like, I'm not an institutional religion guy either. But and it's cheesy, and I get really nervous talking about what matters to me about like dancing and because it can sound cheesy, but it's actually just been incredibly meaningful for me. It's helped me get in touch with my body. It's helped me be less anxious about it's helped me to take up space in a way that's important, while also making space for other people. That's what dancing is. Like, you can't, this idea that people have to shrink, I think is really bad. And it makes a bad dance floor when everyone's trying not to jostle. You just have to flow, you have to move. It's opened me up to queerness in important ways, but also has helped me understand that queerness is not a metonym for goodness, which is like sometimes what you get in popular culture now. I think that's really dangerous. So I mean, for me, it's when I make music, I'm really influenced by this philosopher named Aubrey Bergson, Bergson, and Deleuze, and both of them are really interested in non um, non sort of ways of thinking that aren't captured in language necessarily. And so when I make music, I feel like I'm thinking, and I'm not thinking discursively. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm not thinking discursively, but I'm totally thinking. And so like one of my albums is all about Gnosticism. I'm always trying to. I always joke that in my DJ sets and in my music, I'm trying to make people. This gets to your question about feeling happy. I want people to be a little bit horny, and a little bit sad, like a little bit melancholy. And a friend joked that it's melon horny.
Wow, you've been in a genre.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Like when I've had profound religious experiences, dancing, thinking about the world, and like feeling the pain of the world. And like you said, I go to the marches, I do all the stuff that we can do. It feels very politically weak, but I feel like we kind of are politically weak. But it's still, I think it's something about paying witness and sitting with the suffering in the world, I think is important, and doing so joyfully. That feels like a paradox, but I think that's actually kind of, I don't know, that's the best of religion, I think.
Yeah, fuck, that's amazing. That was really articulate. Well, thank you for staying up late to hang out with us. Obviously, you're a DJ / partier / just drug using freak. So the nighttime is when you come alive. But so we'll let you go shove a bunch of ketamine up your ass. But no, thank you. And then obviously, guys, look up Anthony's work. And I'm gonna say something, and you can tell people no. But I would say, like, if you maybe like are looking around online and you see a paper that Anthony wrote and you're like, oh, it's paywalled or it's an academic thing, maybe they shoot you a message or hit you up.
Okay. Yeah. I'll send you a PDF of everything I got. Don't worry. Like,
I said this in the chat earlier, but I feel like a thing that happens sometimes, guys, is like we see books, and then I know some of the people that, we had Matt McManus on the show last week, and he has a book out, and it's cool, but it's an academic publisher and it costs a lot. But then Matt was just like, maybe just email me. And guys, most academics will be like that, because most academics aren't making money off their books anyways, and they actually want people to read them. So I'm giving everyone permission to bug Anthony and other academics, because people like people to read their work.
I would never recommend you do this, but there's a website called Anna's Archive that's taken over from LibGen and ARG, and is maybe not housed on dodgy Russian servers anymore. It's on some other dodgy servers. But like my university, I didn't want to correct you earlier. I'm no longer chair, and we no longer have a religion department because they've closed it. So you're
just like a guy, you're like intellectual janitor on the third floor.
I mean, I'm a professor still. I'm still there. Yeah. But I mean, our library hasn't bought a book in 10 years now, and almost all of my research is made possible by piracy. So big up to the pirates. And one last thing, what I've learned, because I was like, how do academic publishers exist? They exist because all the R1 professors have insane book buying budgets. I have friends at Columbia. Their book buying budget for the year is around $4,000, $5,000. That's a subsidy for places like Columbia University Press. So steal without guilt. Don't steal from musicians without guilt. You should feel a little guilty when you do that. But steal from academics without guilt.
Well, and then I'll say with musicians is, this is a total side note, but if you're primarily listening to music via streaming services and shit like that, then at least if an artist you like comes into town, pay money to go see them, and then buy some merch. Worst case scenario, spend $25 on a cool t-shirt, and then people will think you're cool if you wear a shirt of a cool musician, and you'll have more sex. Guaranteed. For sure. Guaranteed. I'm getting a lot of love in the chat. Anthony, will you come back and talk to us again sometime?
I mean, I'd love it.
Let me share your
it's just really good to talk to you.
I can only do it like this though. If it's not like creating content, I'm dead inside.
Oh man, I love creating content. So yes. But yeah, I mean, I know you got another guy. And
mostly I got
free to kick me off.
Break. Yeah, I guess
Cool.
I'll kick you off now. Go enjoy
Okay.
the Scottish evening, sir. Thank you so much for being here again.
Dude, thank you
Go
so much
round
for
of
having me.
applause.
Love you. Love this. It's amazing. Thank you for everyone for watching. I'm sorry if I didn't answer your questions. Email me. Bye.
Hey, guys, that was Anthony Paul Smith, academic, DJ, man about town, very like articulate person. One of those guys I have some of my best memories are times where I was like 4.5 pints deep at a pub listening to Anthony talk about philosophy and religion and ideas in a way that was so articulate and so inspiring. So, great to have a person like that to come on the show. And thank you all for being kind of into it and cool with it, because I like to have people like that on the show. I like to talk about ideas. I like to have folks that are academics that can speak to regular people here. So thanks for the positive feedback there. Also, do let me know if there's folks that you would like to see on the show who you think have the juice. Do let me know. Let's see. I'm going to do a bathroom break. I was going to see when Lux pops in, and maybe I could wait till he's here and do it then. A couple things while we're hanging. Please do remember, go follow Anthony and follow. I know he's at least on Blue Sky still. As a reminder as well, we have our coffee partner. And again, they're not paying me to say this. They just partner with us. I get some free coffee. You get discounts on coffee if you want. Yes, please. The number one purveyor of fine coffee in the United States of America. I'll show you something real quick before we bring your boy on. I mean, look at Yes Please's website. Like, this is no joke. This is like a real website run by real professionals who care about making good coffee. And with the code BurnsBeans, you get 20% off. I'll shoot you the link to Yes Please in the chat as well. That information is all in the description. This is truly not a weird thing for me where I'm making much money off this. This is a thing where they make good stuff, and I like the stuff that they make, and I would like to share that with you. That's all that's happening here. That's all that's happening here, guys. I'm bringing Lux on. Hold on. Got to do some stuff. Michael Luxembourg, you know and love him. We're going to talk about something very fun in a second. But Lux, right off the bat, I'm going to say that you get to do a Q&A session. So, folks, if anyone has any questions for Lux, oops, I made him go away, and I didn't mean to.
I'm
you
back.
Can ask him right now. I'm going to piss in the chat. Open season on Lux questions. Go.
Let's go, folks. Hit me with what you got. Easy, quick. It's time to warm me up, friends, with questions. Any question at all? Come on. What you got? I'll just start talking about stuff. Well, next time, Arash Mickey, next Techno Poverty, you can make the time to hang out for a little longer. But yeah, here I am. Burns isn't on my shit lib tier list. He's good. He's got to watch himself. But he's good. We're currently playing the game of my choice on Techno Poverty, so that's that one. Favorite color is green. Favorite food is udon noodles. Favorite issue of Penthouse Forum is the one where they announced my friend Renee Olstead was the Penthouse Pet of the Year 2024. Are we at war yet? Not quite, but it looks like we're getting closer. Burger, dogs, hot dogs, baby. Let's go. Alan Badu or Zizek? I like Badu. Zizek was so good at the start of his career and became so annoying towards the end. Favorite brand of chocolate? Love me a Dairy Milk. Gotta be honest. Question I don't understand? Don't have an answer for you. A bit or not? Usually a bit. What have I been listening to lately? A lot of the Worst of All Possible Worlds and a lot of Big Soft Titty.png. What makes a quality baseball cap design? That's a great one. It's got to be grabby, and it either has to reflect a really fun idea or a really fun, ironic sort of image. Like, I'm not the biggest horse fan, but this is so aggressively horse that I like it. What I know about Kaiju Big Batel, right before Party World Wrestling was a victim of the novel coronavirus, we were planning a crossover show with Kaiju Big Batel, and we were making plans to operate with P. Lander Z and all those folks to put together a big comedy wrestling event that was derailed due to the novel coronavirus. So
you're getting so many good questions. Jesus Christ.
You could learn a lot. You could there's an alternate history where I've done a lot with Kaiju Big Patel, but instead nothing. The future of digital activism sorry, I'm just gonna try and burn through as quick as I can.
Get there for you. I'm loving this.
Digital activism is just like, so when I did the Verso stream with Robert Kurvitz, the guy who made Disco Elysium, and Miriam Deed, he made this claim that art doesn't do anything. It's just a bonfire around which like-minded people with sort of similar perception of material reality can gather and then share their perceptions, and that those perceptions of the conversations what activates stuff to happen. And I think you can sort of think about digital activism in the same way, that it's a way in which to create those bonfires of shared community, but the actual manifestation has to be actually engaging with each other in actual space, doing stuff. Take on the NYC mayor race. Don't rank Cuomo. My friend Charlie is in charge of the Don't Rank Cuomo Even at All, or whatever it's called, campaign. So don't rank Cuomo. Rank Zoran 1. Lander, I would put 2. And then after that, you could do whatever. What's my middle name? Etkin. It's my mom's last name. Which is why my password for nothing, I don't use the mom's maiden name question because it's on my ID. Haley Joel Osment in an AI part 2 is a really weird idea, but I'm into it. I think it's funny. Favorite 90s cartoon? I'm a Rocko's Modern Life head. Gotta say it. It's the truth. When are we coming? It's coming up soon on Techno Poverty. We're gonna be playing Nocturne until I'm dead. We're getting through the game so slowly. I'm going to die before we finish it. Wisecrack T on my end? Legally? No. Burns is allowed to get a little lived up sometimes. The treat, but that's okay. Wow. I have the new Rido game, but we're not. Oh, that's Techno Poverty. I have the new Rido game, but we're not going to play it. Right? We're in the middle of something. What is Techno Poverty? It's an incredible stream that Henry and I do. Well, Henry does, and I show up on Tuesdays. Book rec. I just fuck it. I reread the Hollows by Brian Catling. That book's weird as hell, but it's so fun. It's so good. If you want to get weirded out by some really weird stuff, that's the one. Favorite state flag? Gotta be Maryland, baby. Favorite sushi roll? Give me a straight tuna, dog. I love it. Favorite beer style? I'm a Pilsner or a blonde kind of guy. I like it light or a Kolsch. Was the Emperor wrong with the way he treated the Primarchs? Obviously, yes. You can't be that way with your children, even if they're like made up children. What mess should I write? I mean, the classic, dude. You know, born in a mountain, lives in a cave, trucking and fucking is all that I crave, is what you should put on the back.
Wait, definitely not Brandon. Did I mention that on stream, or did you see me getting a burger at the window in Hollywood last week? I'm just curious. I really did enjoy that burger, but I also had a milkshake. And plug your ears, guys, if you're squeamish. But then I had the runs for 24 hours. Okay. Okay.
That's that rapid fire.
Okay, that was really good. I really appreciate it. Friends, Lux is here to talk about something that he recommended. We let Lux pick a topic. So I'm going to hold on. Let me get this on screen. I think I have to do this. Nope. We're going to make it work. So I'm going to maximize that. No. How do I do this? Give me 2 seconds, guys. Oh, here we go. Yes. Tuxedo catfish thread on Blue Sky. Okay. So this is a thread that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. I think
from the account Tuxedo Catfish. And it's responding to, I'm just going to change the size of this slightly. The initial post from Haas of Decline said, I think a lot of the terror of the modern age can be understood by the fact that the internet accelerated the development of the worst type of person, the anti-intellectual nerd, the worst type of person. Something I haven't thought about before. And then I'll read the main post and we can talk about it. Tuxedo Catfish said, basically, yeah, my theory is that knowing things basically peaked in perceived coolness somewhere around 1970, has been steadily declining ever since. Being a nerd is definitionally about your relationship to trivia, but trivia isn't actually the same as expertise. So start with this, Lux. Why did you find this an interesting thing to talk about?
Well, I mean, I think Lux Lore, we've talked about it. House of Decline, beloved comics artist, is a longtime friend.
Nice.
We went to college together, played in bands together and stuff. And so I follow all of her posts, And I saw her make this original post, and I was like, that's so funny, Alex, you're so right, as usual. But then this retweet popped up on my timeline, and I was so struck by how extremely precise it is, because, I mean, obviously, you know, we worked at Wisecrack together, or whatever, the old channel, and you have both on streams and are just talking to each other, heard me rant about this stuff quite a lot. That there is this framework of relationship to media, especially IP stuff, not exclusively, that is so about being the best fan and the most knowing and the most, what's a good way to put it, the most comprehensively aware of the fiction or whatever kind of guy. And that's what criticism is. That's what engaging with the thing is. And it is so accurate that that's what so much of culture is now. And I hate it. I think it sucks.
So how would you define, I know you're kind of already doing this, but to be very clear here, how would you define and give an example of what an anti-intellectual nerd is?
Remember when Last Jedi came out and
there.
There was that sequence where they like hyperspeed the ship into the, what's it called? Into the other, like they turn into the other ship and they turn it on the jet, they turn the hyperspeed and it blows through the other jets and everything explodes.
Yeah. They use the ship as like a bomb, basically.
Yeah. And then everyone was like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
That shit was so annoying. It was a dramatically compelling, insanely cool thing. There was not a reason to be like, that's not how it works, outside of like people's decision that that's how canon goes. It was all, there was no discussion of craft or theory or art to that choice, to that conversation. It was only about, does this fit within a conceived notion of canonicity or accuracy? And that's not intellectual, it's not artistic, it's not creative, it's not interesting. It is just multiple choice remembering stuff.
And would you say that there's like a joylessness to this type of person? Because I mean, you know, for me, like, I think sometimes, to use the Last Jedi example, I think in consuming media, especially media that's not meant to be consumed with a level of academic rigor, there's times in which you kind of like, you know, suspension of disbelief. You make a decision to just have some fun with something because it's more joyful to do that than to be like, well, actually. So is the anti-intellectual nerd someone that basically sacrifices joy or like community for the sake of feeling right, or for the sake of like gatekeeping some type of specialized trivia?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I think it's, what's a good way to put this? I think further down the thread, there's a tweet where Tuxedo Catfish.
Oh yeah. I'll start. Let's go through the thread. So we have the first one. So the second thing says, a lot of the friction between nerd culture and academia public intellectuals used to come from the latter making fun of the former. Think critics mocking Star Trek technobabble for not being eternally consistent, and nerds for thinking it meant anything. So yeah, I guess historically there's friction between nerd culture and academia public intellectuals, and that public intellectuals took things very seriously. And the nerds cared about the meaning of those things were inconsistent. The essence of the attack is the thing you like doesn't actually have any substance. There's nothing to know.
Right. So then here, the next post is kind of the part where we start to get to what I think is the juice here.
Okay. So that one says, it is, in all honesty, a kind of unfair criticism. The technobabble doesn't actually matter. Real knowledge of the show consists of interpreting its themes, the production process, knowledge of past media, which isn't actually the same thing as canon, etc.
Right. So this is, I think, part of the crux here, is that I am the last person on earth to be like, you shouldn't think too much about this fictional media. I spend so much of my time talking about, writing about, thinking about movies, television, books, sort of music, but I'm not that knowledgeable about it. Stuff like that. A lot of my time. One of my main things. It is the fact that I am so neurotically preoccupied with this stuff is why we ended up working together. But what's interesting about that stuff isn't that there's a list of in-universe facts that you can just learn. It is that there is a production process and there are people making choices and having thoughts and expressing ideas through this form, through the technique, and through the deployment of style and the creative application thing of dialogue and narrative and visuals and all this stuff and form to create a thing and to say a thing and to articulate a thing. And the emphasis of the trivia thing over the piece of work itself as a piece of work is where we start to fall into this sort of problematic space of the anti-intellectual nerd, right? There's the next, this next post is actually,
but on the other hand, it's picking up on something nerd culture actually did and still does, treating fiction as a simulation or as a sort of window into another world, as if it were real. It's kind of a fine distinction. I'm not saying nerds literally believe in Narnia or the Federation, but the most important quality of these fictional worlds becomes their ostensibly objective nature. Knowledge is justified belief. It has its basis in truth. In fact, rather than admit trivia isn't knowledge, nerds invented or rather borrowed a justification. This is what we call canon. Okay, this is interesting.
Yeah, this is the juice, right? Is that and this goes to Keith Hayes' question about is intellectualism a truth or a search for truth or a performance? Intellectualism is just the deployment of technique and thought and criticality to stuff. It's just an action. People probably want to find truth in things, and you can, but it's not a necessary telos, nor is it, in my opinion, super duper possible. But it's an action you can take, right? The same way that exercising is, or that walking your dogs is, or whatever. The anti-intellectual nerd is one who finds the particular value of this thing to be, as this thread puts it so well, a window into another reality, and that the value of this thing, the intellectual value here, is just understanding the window to that reality. When in fact the intellectual value is analyzing the fact that somebody made this. People made choices. People put together a thing. People put cameras in specific places. I want to get ahead of this because people are mentioning the autism thing. There's plenty of autistic people who I know who, arguably of whom I am one, who are very much interested in the technical and specific frameworks of things and not just the list making. And if you like list making, that's fine. People can make lists. You're allowed to do whatever you want. But it is when the privileging of what constitutes a thing as good art or good work or whatever does it cohere to the pre-established list that we run into an aesthetic problem, right? That's where it becomes an issue. There's plenty of trivia is interesting, and there's plenty of reasons to collate the sort of canonical framework the canonical frameworks to create a thing that you can analyze. There's a lot of good stuff there. You can do a lot of repetition, leitmotifs, etc. But making that the whole of the thing is missing the forest for the trees, basically.
Yeah. Well, here, this next part. Oh my God, I'm getting worked up on this. Not worked up in a bad way.
This thread's so good.
Also, if you're still here hanging out with us as we get nerdy about this, thanks for being here. Like the stream, all that stuff. Really appreciate you guys. Not really realizing what they were doing, they moved literature and cinema and eventually gaming out of the realm of media studies and critical theory and into the realm of theology. Theology, like law, is a humanity pretending to be a science, and science appeals to nerds. I mean, this is interesting too, because this is where I start to see the overlap between this tendency in media and a similar tendency in like reality. And I was literally just had a theologian and philosopher on talking about what happens when this like logic gets made political. Says, I'm trying to strike a balance between jargon and clarity, and it's really hard. You're doing a good job, Tuxedo Catfish. Philosophy of language has a long and hotly debated conversation about the boundaries of descriptive versus performative language, sort of an extreme positivist position that all knowledge consists of statements that can be evaluated for truth and everything else is nonsense. Like a positivist is basically has to reduce statements about morality to either gibberish whereas implicitly and exclusively saying something about the speaker's belief murder is bad is either not knowledge or it's just a truncated version of I believe murder is bad. The position, which is arguably a little bit of a straw man, blah, 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 was pushed back against most famously a guy named John Langslaw Austin. Okay.
You have to click the more button to get the rest
right
of this.
here?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. The first time I've ever done this on this app.
It's the long thread, but we can kind of skim over the philosophy of language. I mean, we can get into the philosophy of language stuff if you want, because it is interesting, because I love philosophy of language, but
I hate it.
I like J.L. Austin a lot, but like it gets pretty dense. It gets pretty dense, and the essay gets pretty crunchy, or the thread gets pretty crunchy.
Yeah.
At that point.
Well,
but,
you just keep talking. I'm gonna scroll.
Yeah, you go nuts. But to go back to what we were sort of talking about, like the framework of analysis that situates the value of a piece of work in terms of its internal coherence to it gets in the whole word learning. That shit's crazy.
Wow.
But in terms of its coherence to like a canonically established or fictionally established canon, is like loses track of the reason why art is cool or good, right? Because we don't get to go back to the Holdo maneuver. You can have your quibbles about how the Holdo maneuver fits in with the Star Wars canon. I know people in chat did, or how it works within like the fiction or within the physics of the thing. But yeah, there's what it did do, inarguably, was make a clear argument and a clear sort of moral and claim about duty and about sacrifice. And it was a narratively justified and built moment of drama in a thing. And it was cool at doing that. And it, things that are dramatically and narratively framed don't have to be good for everyone, don't have to work for everyone. But you can criticize it as a narrative and dramatic thing, but criticizing it because, like, in this world of magic, a magic thing didn't work the way I think magic does, isn't really fair. Now, there's some pushback you can have there, right? Like, if you have like a Brandon Sanderson type who writes 700-page novels that are all about the rules of how magic works, and then they break the rules, that kind of sucks. But I don't think Star Wars was meditating meaningfully on the physics of how hyperspace works in the text of the film.
Sorry if I'm breaking anyone's brain by all the scrolling, guys. This thing just keeps going.
It's a long one.
Here, I'll post the link to this in the chat so you guys can check it out.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot
of good stuff
going on here. Yeah.
But yeah, we can
you can just say more about what you're thinking with this.
My big thing about this is that I think this just speaks to like the problem of Brandon Sanderson is a theologian in many ways. Maybe even literally. But yeah, I'm inclined to sort of to think that this articulates a certain breed of nerd. And again, I want to distinguish, like, I understand there's differences in information processing and sort of neurotypicality that lead to certain types of processing. I think that for the most part, when you have people who are doing this because of like a neurodivergence question, they aren't going to be assholes about it.
Mm-hmm.
But many people are assholes about it, which is sort of.
And I wonder, like, so just to try to connect threads, sometimes I want to do it too much. But like one of the things I was talking about with Anthony Paul Smith is the way in which a lot of contemporary theological political stuff is motivated by like an anxiety, almost like a scarcity, and this sense of like the others are coming for us, or we might not be the big dogs. Is some of this like when identity formation is so tied to being a particular consumer of certain types of media that one must build a wall around that type of like canon, because then one's very identity is tied to those things. And there's like a fragility around that, the same way in which one, to use the theological thing, if I both interpret the world and understand myself via a particular theological framework. And if someone pokes a hole in that framework, it's not just that like something I check out sometimes is potentially flawed. It's like the thing that I've connected my being to is flawed.
Yeah, I think there is a big part of that is I want to the A.V. Hilton thing that popped up I do want to engage with momentarily, but I think there's a big part of it is the thing you're describing, for sure. That there's this core identity that is formed around liking the thing, and then there is this like series of tests and frameworks that you can apply to assert your own position. And that is, I think, a big part of it is anxiety. And I think that sort of goes to this question, this autistic question, right? That A.V. Hilton is raising. That like, I don't think that it's bad to find comfort or find something value in the text or the truths of a canon, but that you have to do that in a way that is engaging with, or that you to fully appreciate that you also do engage in the artistry, like they're saying. And I think that's sort of the issue here, is that like when there is a huge privileging within sort of broad mainstream media discussion of the canonicity question, of the sort of lore and trivia stuff, over the question of the artistry and things like that. Like when you
to speak to something, and I guess to like continue to riff off Aoife's question here, something I'm nerdy about is, you know, the Grateful Dead, and it's a thing where like I get obsessive over minutia and detail of like, when was the show, who recorded it, who sat in that night, what was the weird thing that happened. But that's not the primary mechanism of my enjoyment of the music. And if I'm hanging out with someone who doesn't care about that stuff, I'm not like mad at them. Or if that person can't tell me what guitar Jerry played on what day, I'm not mad about it, because that's like a secondary thing to the appreciation and enjoyment of like the aesthetic object.
Yeah, exactly. And I think exactly. And it's become such a greater, it's become that, but scaled up to a bajillion in terms of like, if you go online, you know, to the internet where we all live, so much of the writing about stuff, about media, is about the, you know, does this a plot hole? Does this fit in the canon? Mm-hmm. Was it, what does this mean about the truth about sci-fi or whatever? And that prioritization is a big loss to the art of criticism, as Technopoverty put it, and to the value of intellectualism and process, because it's not about learning. Like, it is effectively the choice or the inclination to privilege the facts of a fictional universe over the expressive tendency of the real world that created that fictional universe. And to view fiction in particular as just sort of reporting about a place that doesn't exist, as opposed to,
yeah, I get what you're saying,
as opposed to a work of art made by people, loses so much of what makes makes the thing strong and good.
Well, and one thing I'm like thinking as well is what you're kind of describing is, you know, someone builds a stage and builds some backgrounds upon which a play is produced. And the point for them is to facilitate the play. The play is going to explore themes that connect to you, the audience's humanity. So to watch the play, but then nitpick over like the authenticity of the sets or the structural bearing load of the stage or something like that, is over obsessing on background structural elements and not the thing itself. In that, like the same way someone could watch a story, play a game, and get over obsessed with the trivia and minutia of the world, thus missing the human importance of the thing.
Yeah, and again, I just want to, yeah, exactly. And I wanted to like stress this because I feel like the chat is sort of characterizing the stuff that I'm saying in like a really strange way. You're allowed to like whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. What I do care about is the mainstream normalization of a tendency to prioritize the acquisition of narrative trivia over the prioritization, over the critical analysis of the work. Right? That's the distinction. That's the issue at play. When anyone can be in a trivia and you can talk to your friends about trivia, and like I love doing that shit. It's
the
fun
same.
to do.
Yeah.
But the way that the culture is framed around, like in the discourse around art, is so grounded in trivia and not the knowing things, not the intellectual position of analysis, is not a good thing. And yeah, it's this desire to
Well, is it sort of like just knowing what you're doing when you're doing it and not doing the fun, nerdy trivia thing and thinking to yourself that you are doing media criticism or literary criticism or something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
And knowing how to distinguish the two such that I can sit around with some friends and have a nerdy discussion about like the inconsistency with something that happens in a story while not thinking that in doing so, I am like Manola Dargis breaking down the thematic of a piece of art.
Right. Being like, it's kind of funny how in this movie, the internal coherence of the lore regarding magical swords doesn't add up. It's like a fun thing to think about, right? It's
yeah, I think what Aoife says here makes sense. Aoife says a lot of the time it's about finding comfort in a story world that makes sense when the real world seems nonsensical, but you can't delude yourself that that's real criticism. For sure. Yeah. And that's why like some of my favorite stuff that I might watch over and over are things that I could like with my critical hat on be like, this isn't very good. But with my just like human anxious brain can be like, oh, this makes me feel good. This provides something to me, and that's okay, and that's important.
Yeah, man, I'm out here reading Sebastian de Castell novels. Like, I'm not trying to be like high culture is what you need.
Yeah. Yeah, Sean Harriman says it's having a fun convo, shoot the shit versus a debate. Yes, and I think this is important because I think this ties to what this looks like when it expands out of the realm of media consumption and commentary, because I think it leads to a lot of really bad and weird debates about politics and society when people, I mean, I hate to reference this, but I really quickly, it's like when a couple weeks ago, I had a talk with a person on this show and then someone made 2 videos analyzing the debate. Like their brain was unable to be like,
oh yeah,
this is just people talking. Everything has to be like a debate. The stakes of everything have to be that we're analyzing, and to me, like that's where it kind of both evacuates some of the fun or enjoyment out of talking shit about ideas or debating or things like that, while also doing something that borders on like, pretty masturbatory. And I'm not trying to shame anyone for their gooning tendencies there. Yeah, Urbane Legend says nitpicking stuff, that's a bit of fun. And then, hey, Cynthia, you come in at the right time because you say you're too busy distracting yourself from the daily horrors of our lives. That's kind of what we are talking about here. Techno Poverty says, oh my God, yeah, some people want to debate. It sucks. For sure. Like in this, it's not Ronald rightfully praising Aoife's take there. But yeah, I think it's like, it's not coincidental that the rise of the anti-intellectual nerd happens in concert with the rise of everything has to be debate culture. And
yeah,
exactly. I think that's like the larger thing, the larger kind of personality type that becomes problematic.
Someone pointed this out like way earlier in this conversation, that like the thing we're talking about, right, is sort of just Gamergate, right? This is the whole thing, is like there is it's so easy to take this little walk, right, from the details of this fiction don't go here to the canonicity of the fiction as I've imagined it, to why is there a girl with a sword? That's not how sword works, right? It's not a long work or long walk to get from one to the other. And that's why this is like a thing of relevance, right? This is why it isn't just like, I like talking about where cameras are versus like, I like talking about how many aliens are in the movie. Like those, that's fine to do. And it's fine to have different conversations, right? It's fine to have different conversations about what's valuable, what you like about a thing. But there's the tendency towards this non-critical canonicity framework is where you is so obvious, or to me at least, very obviously intimately related to the construction of the sort of moralizing perspective on media that, you know, claims to know what a movie should be based on, you know, the canon or the rule or whatever. And I think that's, and then that, you know, translates into all these fucked up things because people have their own ideas about what the about what the thing should be. And that's, I think, where this becomes a real problem. Yeah, this is very Hofstadter, right? This is very the anti-intellectual tendency in America, whatever Hofstadter calls this stuff. Like, this is not a brand new thing, but I do think the articulation of the anti-intellectual nerd is an important one because there's a certain degree of I'm going to try and see if going outside will help if it's not too loud out there because the dogs won't be there. There's a certain degree to which, you know, nerddom and the signifiers of nerddom are aligned with the idea of a sort of oppressed position, right? Of, you know, people were mean to us in high school for liking comic books, or this comic book stuff used to be for nerds, which was exclusive or whatever. And so, then,
well, and then the funny thing too, like the nerd thing, is how much this type of thinking has almost taken over like sports culture as well. Where so many people now, the way they consume sports media are either podcast about the specificity of like behind the scenes stuff or about like gambling and things like that, and less about the thing itself. And I mean, even makes you think of like the fact that I was talking to my brother-in-law about this, how athletes get like death threats when the gamblers don't win off of them because people don't watch sports as some mechanism of abstraction and relaxation. They watch it as a mechanism of like understanding the numbers right so they can win.
Yeah, I mean, beyond even that, I mean, that's you know, but like I think the more pointing example of what we're talking about is the fucking WNBA race war, right? Like,
yeah,
there is an entire take economy built around the idea that sometimes Caitlin Clark gets fouled by black women. And that like Christine Brennan is like literally writing a book about it and trying to become famous for basically being like, you know, maybe for saying some like pretty inflammatory and fucked up stuff. And that's, I think, sort of the analogy here is like when we abstract the thing into these culture war spaces, that, you know, the thing itself is diminished. And then the reason why this anti-intellectual nerd thing ties into this is that it's a framework by which you can impose that culture war tendency onto stuff without engaging with the material of the text itself in any real way.
Yeah.
Right? We privilege that kind of analysis, then it's just as culturally legitimate to be like, why girl have sword, as it is to be like the undertones of this movie imply XYZ thing about our culture. Those become treated as the same thing, whereas when one requires like a real intellectual rigor and one requires noticing that girl have sword, right? And that's where it starts to become a cultural problem, is that it's really easy to, when we conflate those things and we make them equal in the same framework, then we run into a world where everything gets really yucky all the time.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think you made good points, and I think I'm gonna let you go now because it got really noisy, and also I'm gonna stop the stream soon because I gotta leave early to go pick up my kid.
Well, I can leave.
No, it's all good.
They're not dead.
The
dogs are not dead.
No, I like this though. I think
quiet.
This has been a solid chunk, and I'm gonna end soon anyway, so it's all good. I feel, if you have any final thoughts on this, I feel like you've been cooking, and I feel like,
I mean, I just like want that. I think that the last thing I was just saying is sort of the main thing that I want to get across is that
yeah.
that there's no reason, right? There's no moral rejection to say, like, there's nothing morally bad about wanting to have your canon shit and wanting to have your list. It is this idea that provides some kind of major insight into the world or into the text itself.
Yeah.
That is more significant than actual critical analysis. And I think that when we lose, oh, come on, Noodles. Hey, buddy, come here. I'm trying to finish something. That when we get locked into those cycles, or when we allow that to be the determinant of art, we lose a lot of what art is good for. And art is good for a great many things in terms of getting people mobilized and organized around a thing. It's like, so many people, a good example is like Andor, right? So many people, the conversation on Andor is interesting because so many people have been engaging with the themes and the ideas that are present in Andor. It would be so much less compelling if the conversation was strictly, how did Mon Mothma get here?
Well, yeah. The worst conversations on that show where people are like, technically, this doesn't make sense because of this or this Legends canon. Yeah, it's stupid.
And that's the thing I'm trying to get at, is that, like, our society prioritizes that stuff in many ways, and that's not so good. Obviously, you want to make your list, you want to hang out, you want to do canon stuff, then do it, have a great time. I think that's awesome. So this is a good one, but this is a good thing to leave on. Christ said, doing critical analysis of modern pop culture is how you do analysis of the world you live in. Pop culture is just society telling itself stories about itself.
Ooh.
It's important to know what stories the world we live in is telling to us and to the people around us, because those stories form our perception of reality in the spaces that we occupy. It's important to get engaged with those kind of things, because that's how we know the moral values, the cultural values of the world that we're engaging with. And that's a pretty important thing to do. And, like, that doesn't have to be your job, but I think it's important that we have a culture that understands that function and embraces that function and prioritizes that function above explaining articles that are, articles that are explaining to me, like, how Mon Mothma got from point A to point B in episode 4 of Andor. Like, that's the problem, is that I think we should have that sort of thing going on as a critical function. And when we don't have that, we choose not to have that, our lives are less for it, and society gets worse. I mean, you can use any sort of critical framework, but it has to be actually critical. You have to engage with the text and see what the text is trying to say, and that's how you're gonna find these things. And so I'll leave you guys with that. It's good to be critical. It's an important way to look at the world.
I want to talk about this more. Yeah. So we're going to return to this one. I'm telling folks that now. So and I check out Techno Poverty. Anything else too.
I won't go outside next time because I won't try. That was a test and it didn't go great.
It was loud. It was a little noisy.
Yeah, we lived kind of close to the highway, but I thought maybe it would work. But anyways, so check out Techno Poverty on Tuesdays. It's great to do. I'm on there from, Henry can remember better, but I think we go from 3 to 6 Central, which is 1 to 4 Pacific. So check that out. Flight Opera is doing stuff, but not for a long time. And then I'll be around here.
You'll probably be back next week, and not the week after.
You and I are planning on doing a bunch of stream stuff. So
yeah, we have some ideas, guys.
I'll be back
some ideas
soon.
All right. I'm gonna let you go for now because I'm gonna wrap up. Then I gotta go pick up the kids. Solo Dad Week, guys.
Wow. All right, good luck out there.
The real troops. Okay, good to do.
Right. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, everyone, give extra shout out to Lux. Follow Techno Poverty. Follow everything Lux does, and Lux will be back very soon. So don't worry about that. A few things before we go. I'll shout it out. If you haven't done it, consider signing up for the Patreon. There's a link in the thing there. Frederick Jameson Reading Group is starting soon. Probably in 2 weeks, maybe. I'm getting prepped for it now. I have a list together, putting together a little curriculum. So if you're interested in joining the reading group, But then, and also if you're trying to be like money conscious, which I totally get, I will remind y'all. So if you want to sign up for Patreon right when the reading group starts and kill it after, who am I to judge how you spend your money? But I'll let you know. But do consider signing up. And if you don't have the money in you right now, you're just not in it enough to pay money, which I totally get. Consider just doing the free membership, because then you'll always know when streams happen and stuff like that. It's a good way to keep up, because the YouTube algorithm kind of sucks. A reminder that you can get Yes Please coffee, which is very good coffee, with the code Burns Beans. If anyone has any questions on the way out, I'm happy to answer them. If not, I'll just say a couple things. The video coming out in a few days is my big here's how I got laid off, here's what happened. It's a video where so much of it had to run through the filter of like, could this get me in trouble? Could I get sued? All that sort of stuff. Hopefully the answers to those questions are no. But that video is coming out. I'm excited about it. It'll be up on Patreon probably on Friday, and then I imagine up on there. Oh, I got to email Eddie back about thumbs. I did like them, but I think last week was just crazy because we finished the stream, Eddie, and then I went on a trip, and then I got back, and I've been solo parenting. Eddie knows how the solo parenting goes. But also have some cool graphics that are coming out. Got some new branding stuff. It's weird to say the word branding, but some new branding stuff for the channel. A thing I talk about this in the video, but I still feel like fuck, man. I wish I just would have had a month to plan and get things ready. So I still feel like I'm kind of treading water, but I'm feeling excited about some videos coming up. I'm finally doing a video that it's going to involve both Frederick Jameson and Connor O'Malley. So I think that's the next thing I'm making. A Jameson and O'Malley video is a real thing. So I'm excited about that. I'm going to do another video. This is going to sound boring, but on the ethics of how we wait in lines and how it reveals a lot of stuff about society. And this next one, I'm excited and scared about. I started working yesterday on the concept for a video about why philosophy kind of doesn't work on YouTube. Oop, oop. There you go. Man, if I tied the kid up in my yard in this climate, I would go to jail. Yeah, Eddie, you're right about the residency. We're spending 2 weeks in Michigan this summer. If anyone's in Michigan, in Southwest Michigan, let's hang. But I'm going to kind of hammer down there and just make Patreon stuff for a couple weeks and get caught up. Calvin, I have a tab open right now where I'm going to start setting up an account for a merch production thing. And this is another thing I was going to email Eddie about, actually, because I want to I'm going to tell you what I want to make. I was thinking about making mugs, hats, and shirts. I was thinking one design. I'll tell you the things I was going to make. I want one design that just says, like, what are we doing? And that could be a shirt and a hat. And then Aoife had this idea of an always historicize. And I think the always historicize thing would be cool to accompany the Jameson reading group. And now I have an idea. What if every reading group on Patreon, we come up with a cool design that goes with like the theme of that thing? And then I could, I'll do it where anyone who's in the reading group, I give a code where the shit is cheap as hell. But yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. Mugs, hats, and shirts. And maybe I could just do one of each. So there's like an always historicize and then the other thing there. Whoa, you have a residency in downtown LA? That's cool. But yeah, yeah, Anthony Paul Smith is right. Our society is hard on parents. Again, I know some of you have kids in the chat. It's crazy sometimes. That's why sometimes I like not being in California with my kids, because I feel like California, especially, people are so intense about parenting. We were in Montana. Again, shout out to Tyler at the Pine Creek Lodge in Montana. But the vibe was so much better there. We went to this outdoor place, and there's like a creek running through the middle of it. There was a bar. There was live music. And people were just letting their kids like run around in this creek and throw rocks and kind of go wild. And my daughter's like a little too young to get that hardcore. But it was nice to just like free range it. Like, yeah, we're in Montana. We're in a beautiful natural place. Let's let these kids fucking run around. The parents can get a few beers, rub around, do whatever they want to do. Burns Night t-shirt for Scottish New Year. That's pretty good. Case of the Mondays with a case of beer image. That's fun. Yeah, Aoife gets credit for that show. Aoife, I'm saying this now so I remember. Whenever that happens, please remind me so that I send you one for free. And when you remind me, don't feel weird. Don't be like, is that like weird if I email Michael to be, can you send a shirt to Australia? Just remind me. Just remind me, because you deserve that. And same thing if, and Eddie, if you have bandwidth issues, it's fine too. But I'm going to hit up Eddie because Eddie helped us make hats for something a while ago, or a logo for a hat that was very good. But I guess that's it. Final thing, if you guys, you can get the coffee. If you need the coffee, consider checking out the Patreon if you haven't already. New shit coming out soon. Love hanging out with you guys. Hey, Andrew Burns. It's my favorite cousin. Don't tell my other cousins that that's my favorite cousin. I have a lot of cousins. Andrew Burns might be my favorite cousin. Is he my favorite cousin? He's at least in the top tier. No, he might be. He might be the favorite. And someone said, what is Lux Podcast? You can follow Techno Poverty on YouTube and Twitch. That's Henry's project that Lux pops in on sometimes. Lux also does a bunch of other stuff. But I think we'll end it here. Look at this Marxist shilling his coffee. Thank you for the JK right after that. And just as always, if there's people you guys want to see on the show or things you want to talk about, hit me up. I'm going to sound corny right now, but we're doing this together. I really believe in that. So if there's topics you want to talk about, if there's an article that you're like, oh, I would love to talk about this with Michael and other people on stream, if there's writers or thinkers you'd want to have on the show, email me, hit me up on social media. And if you're on Patreon, hit me up there. Love you guys very much. Let's have a good week. Guys. And let's pray to friggin' God that World War III does not happen before the next show. Logan, you showed up just in time.